Okay, first, we do wish to acknowledge that the land on which the University of Toronto operates for thousands of years has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. So today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are very grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Okay. So you're coming to university, and unfortunately, unlike high school, university costs lots of money. So what do you need to pay for? It's very important to know where your money is going towards and your payment options to try to get some funding to cover that. So we'll be talking about that here. So first to know, there are two potential types of fees you would be charged. Your fees can be charged on a per course basis, and that would be the case for all students in first year. Everyone's being charged per course. And for the majority of programs you attend at the University of Toronto, you will continue in a per course fee charging method. However, for some special deregulated fees programs, there will be a different fee structure called a program fee, and they might be charged flat rate fees in the fall winter sessions in their upper years. This will only happen once you get into your programs proper in your second year onward, after you have completed your fourth credit. So right now, even though you might have been admitted into, so these programs would be like commerce, and so on. These programs are the deregulated programs. So you might have been streamed into these programs upon admission to the University of Toronto, Mississauga, but you're actually not really in the programs quite yet. You only get into your programs proper in your second year after you've completed your fourth credit and met all the program course requirements to enter your program. So you will be charged normal per course fees in your first year, but once you do get into these programs in higher years, a flat rate program fee may apply in the fall winter sessions, and a higher program fee charge generally will apply overall. In the summers, you will be charged course by course if you do attend the optional summer sessions, but it will be at a higher program fee. So if you're planning to get into one of these programs, where your fee structure will change from a course by course structure in future years. And you can find all of this out on the Student Accounts website, and we do ask all students to become familiar with Student Accounts website. Student Accounts website is studentaccount.utoronto.ca. And they look like this. Hang on a second, go to that. It's maybe somewhere else. It's kind of bugging me. This is Student Accounts website. And to find the fee structures, just go into this menu option and select your current fall winter fee schedule. Pick out UTM. And then depending whether or not you're domestic or international student, pick your fee schedule. And you will see the fee structures here. And we can send a link in the chat as well. But just to show you how you get to it. So they'll list all the fees depending on the programs you get to. So most course by course fees will be covered under table 1. All the higher fee programs, the deregulated programs, will be covered in tables 2 to 6, and you can find the rules about it here. But I'll leave that go for you to investigate on your own. We'll get back to our presentation. There are also other types of fees beyond the course fees, which we were talking about just then. There are also mandatory incidental and ancillary fees. These are mandatory. There is no opt-out out of these fees, except for 2 exceptions. This will be the health and dental plans. But you can only ask for opting out of these fees if you're already covered by a similar plan. Let's say you're under your parents' plan, right? That covers the exact same thing the university plan covers or has better coverage. But if you don't, then you cannot opt out of these fees. These fees also include student services like us, health center, the athletics, the UTM shuttle, and so on, and many, many other fees. Right? So these are mandatory fees. Ancillary fees would be other types of fees that are associated with program study. So for example, if you're taking a science course and there's some laboratory work, there may be lab fees. If you're in the art and art history program, there may be studio fees to pay for your portfolio, art supplies, and so on. In some cases, your professor might be creating publications in terms of further textbooks for you. So if they're creating those, that cost will be shown in the ancillary fees. So these are mandatory fees as well because they are related to your program of study. So you will see these on your fee invoice when you check your fee invoice online. Okay, now let's talk about your registration status. So for now, you should be selecting courses now if you have not already done so, and make sure you do so as quickly as you can, because courses do fill up fairly quickly and you don't want to lose your space in them. So the earlier the better. So you're adding courses. Now, if you check your status on Acorn, you'll notice your status is invite. Right? Invite means you've been invited to enroll in classes. You're a member of the university for the upcoming session. Right? But you're actually not registered. So the way to think of this is if you ever booked a flight, I think of it as when you book the flight and you select the flight you want to take, that's when you're choosing classes, right? You have selected your preferred class, you kind of reserve the space in it, but you're actually not really confirmed to that space. So remember, when you reserve a flight, you actually have to contact them 24 hours before the flight actually takes off to confirm that you're going on the flight, and then that confirms your seat, and then you now should be on the flight, as long as the airline holds that. So the same thing with registration. At UT, when you select your courses, you actually have not registered for your classes, you just enrolled in them. To make sure you're now in your class, you have to register for the university, and that deadline is coming up. It is August 27th for the deadline to register, right? And once you register, you're officially in class. If you do not register by the deadline date, you will actually be removed from your classes, right? And then you have to undergo late registration to get back in your classes. However, you do not get back the space you had previously reserved for yourself. You then have to basically re-enroll in that class. And if that class is now full and has a wait list, you actually will have to go onto the wait list. So it's very important for everybody to become registered by August 27th. So make sure you check your registration status on Acorn. Acorn is the student service that you have to add classes and so on. I should be familiar with that because most of you should be adding classes. Right? If you see your status is registered, then your registration is complete. And then you are officially a member of the University of Toronto and register in your classes for the entirety of the fall-winter session. Right? So you don't have to worry about payment really at this point, or if you haven't paid all your fees, your registration holds for the entire session once your status changes to registered. Now, so I did mention if after August 27th you have not registered, you would be financially canceled, removed from your classes. Your status would then indicate financially canceled, or FINCA is the short form you might see, FINCA. So if you did do that, you have to follow late registration, as I mentioned. Now, if you're on academic suspension or you're unsure if you're on suspension, do check your academic history on Acorn to see, because obviously if you're on suspension, you're not able to register in courses. And if you have questions about that, do take it through AskRegistrar to contact us to see it. They are holding actually the admissions team. The academic team are holding many webinars to actually advise students of the status. So we do recommend you actually go book yourself for one of those webinars for academic advising now, because they'll give you the information. It's much easier at this point of the year than asking a question because of the volume of requests they get. Okay, next thing you should be aware of on Acorn, make sure you do check your student invoice, your tuition fees invoice on Acorn. Right, it's under the finances section, and do make sure you click the button to view your invoice. Invoices were available starting July 15th, so you should be able to see them now. And you should have a fee charge if you have added any course already to your studies. Once you also see your invoice, you should also see the minimum payment to register option in the invoice. So the minimum payment to register is the normal way students would register at the University of Toronto. Right, so this is an example of what a fee invoice will look like, and that's what the minimum payment to register amount would show up as at the bottom of your invoice. So as I mentioned, paying your fees is actually the normal way for students to register officially, and you have to be registered by August 27th. So you might notice on our important dates section on our website, and again, we do recommend you check our website for the important dates. You might notice we recommend students pay as a deadline no later than August 14th. Now, this is not the deadline per se for fees to be received. It's actually a recommend date for you to make your payment, the last date for you to make the payment. The reason for this is we don't know where you bank from. So if it's a credit union or you're getting money from parents who live overseas, you need to allow 2 weeks for that payment transaction to be completed. Hence, we tell you to apply, submit your payment no later than August 14th, 2 weeks ahead of the August 27th deadline, right? However, if you're paying by through a Canadian bank, it usually only takes 3 business days, not counting any bank holidays. But we recommend you try to pay as early as possible to ensure you get into the classes you have enrolled yourself into. Because remember, if you don't register by August 27th, you will be removed from your classes, financially canceled. So that's the normal way you would pay, register by. And the payment amount, the minimum pay to register, you notice would be the full amount of the fall portion of your fees. If you're a returning student and you actually still owe fee arrears from a past session, you actually have to pay those as well as the full portion of the fall portion of your fees to become registered. Right? So yeah, you can't owe anything from past session and go to school. You have to pay them off. So that is the deadline for you to register by, and we recommend you try to pay by August 14th to make sure your payment reaches the university ahead of the deadline of August 27th. Now, there are other ways to register. So I mentioned the first way is to make your payment. Now, if you have requested OSAP funding, and many of you, because you're asking for financial aid, might have applied for OSAP, right? Or if you're in receipt of a scholarship, a sizable amount of scholarship that covers that minimum payment to register, and if you have done so, I do congratulate you. Well done. All right, then there's another way for you to register without you having to pay anything actually up front. And this is the fee deferral option. Right. Before we get to that, we'll talk about payment options. This is covered also on Student Accounts website. So I showed you the website already. Right, the information on payments are there. Do not use the option to pay through Acorn. The only option to pay through Acorn is actually through a credit card, but they charge you a surcharge for that. There's a service fee for paying through Acorn. It's set by Moneris. It doesn't go to the UT. It goes to the company that set up that credit card service, Moneris. And it charges 2.5% of whatever you're paying to UT. You don't want to pay an extra surcharge, so do not use that option. Only do that as a final option if none of the other options will work for you. The way you make your payment is actually through your bank. If you're in Canada or if international payments, there's a different option. Again, we won't go fully through them. I will refer you to the website. I will show you what it looks like on Student Accounts website. Back out of these. If you go back to the main page on the top here, you see a link for, actually blow that up a bit, making payments. And then there's an option for paying within Canada or paying outside of Canada. Right? So you're paying within Canada usually is through your bank. And if you could pay through online, which is preferable, it'll take you all of 2 minutes to make a payment online. Right? So that's highly recommended. If you want to, you can print out an invoice and then take it to your bank, but that'll take your time. You have to wait at the bank and so on. So it's much more time commitment, but if that's more comfortable for you, you can do so. And there's information for that there. But again, I mentioned the credit card payment through Acorn. Again, try to avoid that at all costs because you do get that extra charge. If you're making a payment and you're situated outside Canada, there's specific payment ways to do it. There's only 2 methods, Converter and Flywire. Only use these 2 methods. Do not send a check to the University of Toronto. Problem doing that is they have no idea what that check's for because University of Toronto has many businesses going on as well and many vendors and so on. So if you do pay by check, it might go to an office, then they'll say, oh, well, this is for us. You don't have an account with us. Then they'll send it to the next office. And it'll keep going until they figure out which office it should be going for. So it could be months before that check gets there. And if it's more than 6 months, this check's still dated and then it can't be cashed. In the meantime, you could incur service charges because your payment isn't received. So don't use any method other than the ones they mentioned here through Student Accounts website because this is what they say you have to pay. You should follow those programs. Okay, let's get back to the presentation. Where'd my presentation go? Here we go. Okay, getting back to the fee deferral. So if you are planning to apply for OSAP, or if you're from out of province, another province's funding program, you can actually defer your payment. A fee deferral allows you to register by that August 27th deadline without having to make any payment upfront. So you don't have to worry about making a payment by August 14th. If you are applied for OSAP, and as long as your assessment is not 0 from OSAP, right? Or if you have just applied and hasn't calculated your funding, you should be able to ask for a fee deferral. Right? The fee deferral allows you to register again. And then, and then once you're registered, you do make your payments. And the reason you're allowed to do this is most funding programs will not release funding until the start date of classes in September. But we already told you our registration deadline is August 27th. So obviously, if you're reliant on government funding and the government funding won't send you money until September, you can't possibly make a payment by August 14th. So for that reason, we allow you to register via fee deferral as long as you demonstrate you have applied for OSAP funding. So to do this, and you can also do it for out-of-province funding as well, if you're getting it from another province, as I mentioned. You may also get a fee deferral if you have been awarded a scholarship, as I mentioned before, and the scholarship amount at least covers that minimum payment to register amount showing on your invoice. So there are a couple of ways to do the fee deferral online. So if you go onto Acorn, the OSAP fee deferral, or if you're getting out-of-province funding, it'll work for that too, will show up there. It's under the finances section of Acorn, and you should see a button that's specifically for tuition fee deferral. So all you have to do is click on it, right? And read the conditions and then agree to the terms, and it should be instantaneous. Now, there are conditions for the fee deferral. You must have already applied for OSAP, and you can't have just applied for OSAP because it does take time for the fee deferral database to get updated with your application. So the way that happens is we get data downloads from OSAP. So once you apply, OSAP will send application to the University of Toronto via that data download. However, we don't get a data download every day. It could be every middle of the week, it could be every few days. So it could take a few days. So if you just apply today and let's say OSAP sent the data yesterday, no, you don't be on the database. We have to wait for the next data download for you to be included. So it might take you a few days. So they say 2 days. I would say really it could be half a week to a week before you're entitled to use the fee deferral. So make sure you do apply for OSAP as early as you can, just so you can access a fee deferral. The deadline to use a fee deferral is the same as the registration deadline, August 27th. So we still have plenty of time right now for you to do so, but you should submit your application. If you're getting out-of-province funding, it's a slightly different process. For out-of-province funding, you do have to submit documentation to the main financial aid office at the University of Toronto, which is the University Registrar's Office, right? And then you have to get documentation to confirm you have submitted your application. They might want a copy if you notice of assessment after you fund that out-of-province funding for that. But as long as you get something that shows at least demonstrates you've applied, it can work. And then once they get that documentation from you, they will update the fee deferral database to allow you to use the Acorn fee deferral as well. So if you're coming from out of province, make sure you do apply as early as you can so you can provide some documentation to University Registrar's Office. Now, if you're getting a scholarship or fee deferral, a scholarship that covers it, you want a fee deferral, you can't use the Acorn fee deferral because that's specifically for government loan assistance. Instead, you have to go onto one of our forms. We have a specific form for tuition fee deferral scholarships for that, and then you just have to submit that, and then you have to attach a screenshot or a copy of your award notice that confirms the amount you're getting. Okay, and that's where you'll get a fee deferral. And again, make sure you submit those as early as you can, and try to do it by August 14th so we have time to work on your fee deferral, especially if you're doing the scholarship one. So because we have to do that one manually. If you're doing the Acorn fee deferral, it should be instantaneous as long as they know you've applied. Okay, so here's a demonstration of what you can expect to look at if you're doing the Acorn fee deferral. So under the finances section, you'll notice there's the tuition fee deferral button here. And this is kind of like the information you read. Do you read all the conditions here? Be aware that the fee deferral does not exempt you from service charges. We get that a lot from students. If you are late, if for some reason your OSAP application is held up because there's missing documentation, there's a problem with it, and it delays your OSAP funding, at a certain point, you will be charged service charges for outstanding fees at the U of T, and you're not exempted from fee deferral, so be aware of that. So it's very important for you to get your OSAP application done and processed up to date. But once you do the fee deferral online, make sure you check the box to agree to all conditions. You click on the process, and it'll be instantaneous. It'll say, yes, you're successful, or you know you're not successful. And there could be several reasons you're not successful. One, as I already mentioned, you just applied for OSAP very recently, and so your name's not on the fee deferral database. So in that case, you just have to wait a few more days and then try it again on Acorn, right? And it should work. Second reason is you did not include your full student number, or you put an incorrect student number for yourself on your OSAP application, because we check it against U of T records. So if you don't have your U of T student number on your OSAP application, we can't match you up and you can't get a fee deferral. So make sure you have added your student number in your OSAP application. Third reason is, and this is more for returning students, if you previously attended University of Toronto and you have outstanding fees here, you're not allowed to use a fee deferral, because the rule of the U of T is if you have outstanding fees from a past session, you're not allowed to register for any further session of study. So obviously you can't use the fee deferral because that's a method for you to register, and you're prevented from registering with fee arrears. So you do have to immediately clear your fee arrears. So check your fee invoice, see the amount that you owe, which should be shown in red, and pay that right away. And remember to allow up to those 3 days for your 3 business days. Sorry, not just 3 days, 3 business days, because payments don't work over the weekend. 3 business days for the money to reach your T, and then you could try the fee deferral. And remember, you have until August 27th to use that fee deferral. Here are the registration deadlines for students. So again, we mentioned you can check your fee invoice starting on July 15th. The minimum payment deadline, the recommended one, is August 14th. Now, this is for students who are registering for both fall and winter sessions. Now, if you're only registering for the winter term only, I don't know too many students who would do that, but if you are doing that, there are 2 things to think about. Now, we mentioned here if you enroll after September 16th. Now, some of you who, if you are enrolling for winter only, you might have already selected your classes now. If you have done that, you do have to adhere to this deadline to register officially, because if you don't, after August 27th, you actually will be removed from your winter classes. Now, it's not too detrimental for you if you're only going to winter term, because you can reactivate the student file easily after September 16th and then just add them back. But there is an advantage to registering now for your winter classes. And the reason I mentioned before, students fill up classes all the time. So if you're in a class now, right, and you get removed, there's no certainty you'll get back into the class, even though it's a winter class, if you try to get back in after September 16th. So I would say the better bet is if you're you already enrolled in the class, ensure you keep your space. Do the registration now, and you can use the OSAP Fee Deferral now to get registered for it, or make a kind of a payment now if you can, so that you don't get deregistered after August 27th. All right. So do be aware of that. Whoops, let me go back here. Now, if you are making a payment very late, let's say you are using payment, you don't qualify for OSAP for some reason, let's say you're an international student, don't qualify for OSAP, but your payment is late. If you make your payment after the suggested deadline date to pay within this period, 15th to the 27th, you should also go onto our office forms for the University of Toronto, Mississauga to submit the proof of payment, because there's no certainty your payment will reach the UT by the 27th. And if it does come after that, you may be removed from your classes, right? So you don't want to do that. So we want to ensure that we know you have paid. So you have to provide proof of payment that you paid, and that way we will manually register you as long as we get that. So the proof of payment method is on our website. Actually, I'll show you where you can link to some of our forms quickly on our website. So this is the Office of the Registrar's website. You can click on it at any time, utm.utoronto.ca, and click on the registrar link to get here. Just go to the bottom of the page. You see this tile for forms and requests, and here are all forms, right? So here's the link for the manual feed. Oops, I guess the manual feed is not here. I guess we moved it. Sorry. Oh, okay. Just reading a message here. And back out of the old subreddit. So here's the general request forms. So proof of payment, the link for that information would be here, and there's a link to the information for it. The actual proof of payment was somewhere else on Ask Registrar, but it will link you to it. But this is how you can access all of it. For those students who are registered in winter term only, and you get, if let's say you don't register in the fall term, you get removed, you can reactivate your student record so that you can re-enroll in those classes after September 16th. Actually, you might want to use this. So this one actually has a fee charge involved in it. If you've been out of school for a while, you might just send a ticket to us with the Ask Registrar program system. And Ask Registrar is the main way you would contact the U of T if you have questions to advisors, such as myself, financial aid advisors, or to academic advisors during the school year. You use Ask Registrar, and that's the link to Ask Registrar. Okay, going back to the presentation. And yes, we mentioned that's the crucial date, August 28th. We are removing students who have not registered from their courses if you're in the fall or winter session programs. If you're winter only, be aware of these dates. Okay. Now, I mentioned payment deadlines. I mentioned something called a service charge before. So what is a service charge? So a service charge is a fee charge if you still have outstanding fees. So we do want you to pay all your fall portion fees. The normal rate to register, remember I mentioned, was to pay all of the fall portion fees, right? So that we receive by August 27th. Now, again, if you're reliant on OSAP to pay that, you can get the fee deferral and you're not paying anything up front. But after you're registered officially via the fee deferral, you're still responsible for paying your fees, and you're still responsible for the deadlines for paying your fees. So be aware the U of T does apply service charges for unpaid fee charges. The fall portion of your fees will be subject to the monthly service charge starting in the middle of October and every month thereafter until you have fully paid it off. Right now, usually OSAP will come in September as long as you have submitted your application early enough, and that's why we recommend students apply no later than June. So if you have not applied for OSAP yet, you better do so right away because it's getting very late. Right, and you want to make sure you get your money in time, and we can't guarantee you will get your money in time to avoid a service charge at this point. It can take, because of the volume of applications we get, it can take up to 8 weeks to process an OSAP application. Right, and we do everything in date order receipt to be fair to everyone, so you can't jump the line. If you just say that, oh, I don't want a service charge, but I just applied in September, well, then you have to wait until it's done, because it's not fair for you to process it of someone who submitted the application in August. Right, so yep, first come, first served, and you're better served by applying early. So the deadline to pay your fall fees in full to avoid service charges that you will see on important days is September 30th. Again, that's not the deadline date because the service charge, as I mentioned, will start in the middle of October. But again, since we don't know where you bank from, we're giving you that kind of that extra grace period, the 14 days, in case you are banking at a credit union and you do need 14 days to for your bank transfer to happen, or you're getting money from overseas, which again will take about 2 weeks to happen. So again, we mentioned monthly service charge will start middle of October, and it's only on the fall portion of your fees. The winter portion of your fees will not start incurring service charges until later on. Now, if you have gotten a fee deferral, this is the payment deadline for fee deferrals. The winter portion of fees will start accruing service charges in the middle of February. And here it will be February 14th, right? So the deadline for you to pay your fees will be January 31st, but hopefully you would get the winter portion of OSAP at the beginning of January. That's the schedule for OSAP. So you should be able to cover this deadline. Now, again, if there's some problem your OSAP and still hasn't processed, you make sure you're aware of this at deadline because you will accrue service charges on the winter portion fees starting at this point. Again, these dates only apply to you if you have gone in OSAP fee deferral, right? If you register by fee payment, these dates do not apply to you. And the final deadline to pay all your outstanding fees, and this applies to everybody, will be the end of the session. That will be the end of April 2025. Now, if you have been lucky enough to get a scholarship that covers your fees, then you get a better deal in it. Your deadline to pay your fees without the service charges is actually the end of the session, April 30th. You will actually, if you're able to defer via scholarship deferral, you will actually not incur any service charges during the fall winter session. Right, you do have to have that sizable scholarship for that. So make sure you use the scholarship fee deferral instead of an OSAP fee deferral. Even if you're using applying for OSAP and you're getting a scholarship, use the scholarship fee deferral method to defer. That's a better deferral for you because you don't have to worry about service charges at all. Right now, after the study session is over, the service charges would begin again. So if for some reason you still have outstanding fees after the fall winter session is over, you would start getting service charges starting in May 15, 2025 and monthly thereafter. Same thing happens with students with OSAP fee deferrals. If you haven't paid off all your fees by the end of the fall winter session, you would start also getting, sorry, you would not start, you would continue getting service charges monthly after that. So yeah, it's not great. The service charge is 1.5% per month compounded. Right? Now, 1.5% doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a monthly amount. If you prorate it over a year, 12 months, and remember I mentioned it's compounded, it actually equates to 19.55%. So that's like a credit card level of charge. You don't want to pay that, right? So make sure you try to pay off your fees as quickly as you can to avoid that charge. And again, the deadline to pay all fees we mentioned before is that April 30th deadline. Now, this is this case, the normal case, if you're not getting OSAP and you're not getting a scholarship, so this applies most likely for international students, you're paying everything. Most students who don't qualify for OSAP and are paying out of pocket. Deadline to pay your fall fees to avoid service charge is still September 30th because the service charge still starts in the middle of October, right? So that doesn't change. However, this is a change. The deadline for you to pay the winter portion of your fees is end of November because if you do not have a fee deferral, right, the winter portion fees will actually start accruing service charges in the middle of December. Now, students who had an OSAP fee deferral got this changed to February, and the reason for that is the way OSAP works and most government student loans work. They only give you about 60% of your funding up front in the fall term, and the remainder of your funding at the beginning of the second half of your studies. So that would be January. So it's unfair for students fully reliant on OSAP to have to incur the service charge in December if they don't have access to the rest of their OSAP money until January. So for that reason, we moved their service charge until February. Because it allows them time to access the OSAP funding in January. Again, this all is dependent upon you making sure your OSAP application is done, and that's up to you to make sure it's done. So don't delay, don't say that, I have supporting documentation, I'll wait until later, I'm too busy right now. Don't do that. This is important. You need to get your OSAP done right away so you can get access to your money to avoid these service charges. Because you can't ask for service charges not to be applied because you say, oh, I didn't get my OSAP yet because I didn't submit a document. That's on you. Right, so make sure you submit your application on time, right? And of course, the final deadline for you to pay all your fees is again the end of the session in April 2025. Okay, now we're going to talk about government aid. Yeah, so mostly OSAP. Here we're not really going to touch on out-of-province funding because we're not the experts on out-of-province funding. Those students who are applying for out-of-province funding, you actually should refer your questions to the main financial aid office, which is the University Registrar's Office downtown at St. George. They're specifically tasked to handle all the out-of-province funding. And then you should refer questions to them, and they also handle the documentation that you need to submit that the university will sign for you and process. And they also handle the FIDA Pro process for that. Okay. So the primary program here for Ontario students is OSAP, Ontario Student Assistance Program. Provides financial assistance to students in the forms of interest-bearing loans. Now, recently the federal government actually canceled interest on all their loans. So all the federal portion of your loans will be interest-free. Well, for now, depending what happens with the next federal election, which is coming soon. But for now, they're interest-free. The Ontario portion of your loans do incur interest. So be aware that there are both governments do contribute to OSAP. The Ontario portion of loans will carry interest eventually. Your loans are interest-free, however, as long as you're in full-time studies, right? So you don't have to worry about incurring interest right now, unless you take a break of longer than 6 months, right? If you do that, then your loans actually do enter repayment status, right? Now you can reintroduce interest-free status back into your loans if you do return to full-time school afterwards, but be aware there is interest on those loans after 6 months of leaving school. The good part of OSAP is they also provide interest-free grants to you. They're free grants and they're also non-repayable grants, provided you also meet some conditions. There are some cases where you do lose the eligibility for some of your grants, such as you withdraw from your studies or you underreport income, and then OSAP finds out that you actually have more income, reassesses you for a lesser amount, then you may get a grant overpayment, and then you will convert that extra grant overpayment to loans that you have to repay eventually. Right, but as long as you qualify for it, they are non-repayable, so free money. So very nice, very good program. Also offers programs for full-time and part-time students. I do assume most of you are going to be full-time, as this is your first experience with university. To qualify for OSAP, you must be a Canadian citizen, a permanent resident of Canada, or a protected person in Canada. You gain refugee status. If you are a visitor to Canada, international student, you can't get OSAP. You don't qualify. You must also be an Ontario resident. Now, this is an Ontario resident based on OSAP's definition of it, not based on like Canada Revenue definition. To be considered an Ontario resident, Ontario must be the last province or territory of Canada you lived in for 12 consecutive months without you attending full-time university or college during that period. Right? So then you're an Ontario resident. If you don't meet that conditions, so for example, let's say you born in BC, you lived in BC all your life, you went to high school in BC, and now you've been accepted to the University of Toronto. You say, yes, I want to go to U of T. Right? So you come to U of T and say, oh, now I'm in Ontario, I'm going to apply for OSAP. Can't do that because BC was the last province that you lived in for 12 consecutive months when you were not attending university full-time prior to you coming to U of T. So you have to apply for funding from BC instead. So let's say the same student says, okay, fine, I'll apply for BC for my first year. And then come second year, they say, okay, now I've been out, and let's say this student from BC stays in Ontario during the summer break, right? And they say that, okay, now I'm going to second year, I've been in Ontario for 12 months. Now I'm going to apply for OSAP. Can't do it because you haven't spent 12 consecutive months without being a full-time university or college student in Ontario. So this student has to continue to apply for BC funding. So that's what residency is. So as long as you've been in Ontario for at least 12 consecutive months prior to starting your university studies, so this year's study, then you can apply for OSAP, right? If not, then you have to apply for your home province. Now, if you have been out of high school for less than 6 years, fewer than 6 years, right? Then you are considered to be a dependent student by OSAP by definition of the program. In that situation, if you don't meet Ontario residency requirements, but your parents do, so let's say Ontario was the last province or territory your parents lived in for 12 consecutive months, and you don't meet residency anywhere else, you can get residency through your parents. Okay, but again, if you had met residency through BC, you would have to actually continue getting BC funding because your residency kind of trumps everything. So make sure, but if you don't have residency anywhere, let's say you've never lived in Canada before, but you're, or you lived in somewhere else, but your parents moved here and lived here for 12 months, yeah, you can ask for residency through them. Other condition, you have to attend an OSAP approved program in school. Yes, UT is an approved program, and UTM studies, the bachelor's program is an approved program, so we're fine. However, not all programs at schools do meet OSAP. So even if you're in the University of Toronto, we actually have some programs that do not qualify for OSAP. Primarily the school continuing studies, none of those programs qualify for OSAP. Some of the professional master's programs here at the university do not qualify for OSAP as well, right? So be aware. So if, again, it shouldn't apply to you right now, but it's good for you to know if you're moving on to other schools in the future, check with the financial office of that school to make sure the program you're enrolled into will qualify for OSAP. For you, if you're going for a bachelor program at UTM, it is an OSAP approved school, so you're fine. And make sure it's a degree program. And yeah, against bachelor degree program, you should be in it. Okay, so this is an explanation how OSAP calculates your funding. So OSAP is a needs-based program here that calculates the amount of funding you get. It's not a type of program we just say that, oh, I just saw the university is charging me so-and-so for fees, like no, $9,000, give me $9,000. That's what I need. Oh, and they're also charging me $17,000 for residents, give me $17,000. That's not how it works. It is a needs-based program where they will calculate the amount of funding, and there are some limitations to OSAP. The way to do it is basically like a budget. On one side of the scale, they add up your tuition, compulsory fees, costs, which we will actually provide to the to OSAP because we know the actual costs. You just have to, on your application for OSAP, tell them how many courses you're taking, so we will know the amount of fees you'll be charged. OSAP will also consider money for textbooks and supplies. So yes, unfortunately, you're in university. Unlike high school, you have to pay for everything, all your schooling, and you also have to pay for your textbooks now. So that is a cost to you. So OSAP does consider that textbooks, supplies, equipment, etc., and computer costs. There is a limit to that. It is a pre-assigned kind of limit for the books allowance. And they also consider personal living costs. This would include your rent, food, clothing, communications costs, personal costs, household costs, and so on if you're living away from home, right, and so on. Now, again, this is a limit because, again, living costs can run the gamut. So someone could be living, OSAP expects you to live moderately. If you're asking for financial aid, they expect you to adopt a moderate standard of living. So, for example, you can't say, oh, I'm going to rent a hotel room. I'm going to be in a penthouse. I'm going to get room service every day. That way, I don't have to worry about anything, and then I could just study. So I need $5,000, a month to live in that situation, right? So no, they won't cover that cost because that's nice, and you could probably study very well, and then you're very comfortable. It's not a moderate standard of living, and OSAP won't cover that, right? So the expectation from OSAP is that you adopt share a two-bedroom apartment. The cost that they allow is roughly around, I think it was like $780 a month is the amount of rent they expect you to use, right? And that's it. That's preset. You can't move beyond that. That is the maximum allowance from OSAP. So yeah, if you have planned to live in a much higher cost environment, the extra amount will be your responsibility to cover above what OSAP will consider for cost. So for example, one example of that would be residence, actually. The cost of residence is very high. It's much higher than the OSAP allowance. It's about double OSAP's allowance for living costs, right? Or close to that. So be aware of that. If you're planning to go into UTM residence, OSAP, you'll notice very quickly OSAP won't fully cover that. So you have to start looking for other resources to kind of supplement your OSAP, and we will talk about that later on. The travel cost here they mentioned here is not your daily cost. That's actually part of the personal living cost, your day-to-day travel. Travel here is, let's say you are living far from the University of Toronto. Let's say you live in Windsor. You come to U of T. OSAP actually does allow the cost of 2 return trips home during the school year at the minimum cost. So they'll ask this question of you. So it's kind of like the bus ride here to Windsor. So for Christmas or maybe reading week, they'll allow you to travel home twice, and they'll consider those costs. So you can visit family, be a little homesick, and so on. So those are the costs that OSAP will consider. On the other side of the ledger, they consider the finances and resources that you already have. So there is a student contribution mentioned, and there is a minimum contribution of 3,600 apply for all students. This is input in the application right away. So you actually start off OSAP at minus $3,600 because that's the expected minimum contribution. Because student, you're as a student, you're expected to contribute towards your own costs. OSAP's not covering everything free. So they expect you to work full-time in the summer because you're free in the summer, right? You shouldn't be just going on vacation. They say like, no, you have expenses, right? And this is your expense. This is something you are trying to set up for your lifetime cost. So you are responsible for trying to help yourself pay for it, because at the end of the day, you are responsible for your costs. So you have this expected contribution. Now, if you do have exceptional circumstances where you're unable to find work and you have don't have a lot of savings, that's another area where they expect you to draw from your savings. Let's say you have no savings, so you were unable to look for work despite actually actively looking for work. It's a tough job climate. Let's say you weren't able to find work. Now, the work you're expected to find is any type of work they'll pay you. So it's McDonald's or Tim Hortons. It doesn't have to be something related to your studies only. You say that, oh, I want to be a doctor and I couldn't get work at a hospital as a lab worker, so I didn't get a job. They'll say that, well, no, you could still apply to a Tim Hortons, right? That's a job. They'll pay you money. So the expectation is you make money with any means, right? So, but for some reason, if you applied everywhere and you couldn't find work, there are appeals to mitigate this contribution. So do come talk to the financial aid advisors about possible appeals later on if you're in such a case. They also expect contributions from your parents if it's high enough. So you notice in your OSAP application that they did ask for your parents' income information. So OSAP has their own calculation of what parents should provide to you for your study period. It's not an arbitrary where a parent just say, oh, I'm going to give whatever and that's it, and you can get OSAP elsewhere. Because OSAP is a needs-based program. And by definition, you are a dependent student, as I mentioned, until you've been out of high school for 6 years. OSAP will expect your parents to contribute, and they will calculate this based on your parents' actual information. Right? So you will provide the information, OSAP will calculate it. They do calculate it based on your family size, right? That is a factor in it. And the number of students actually attending university or college is also a factor in, right? But then again, they have a fairly moderate method of calculating, so they might expect a fair contribution from parents. And they also expect you to provide from your assets, right? So let's say, you got a $10,000 in your bank account. You got a gift from grandma. They said, oh, this for you to save, for you to buy a house in the future. So you've been gifted $10,000 and it's in your bank account, right? You can't actually go to OSAP and say that, well, I have $10,000, but I choose not to use it because I have other, lifetime expenses because I want to save this for a wedding in the future. Well, yes, that is a high cost and you want to save for it. But university is also a lifetime expense in your life, right? That you have right now, because who knows, maybe you'll never get married in the future. Now that might not happen, you might be saving for it, but you already have a lifetime expense now. So OSAP will say, yeah, you're supposed to use your money that you have now to pay for your lifetime costs now. You can't say that I don't have money to save for a possible future event. So you can't tell them I don't have assets, and you can't say that excuse assets for that reason. If you have assets, OSAP will consider you to have used it, and they'll give you OSAP appropriately, considering that you have used your assets. And basically, they'll add up all these costs here, subtract the two, that is your financial need. And that's how OSAP works. It's just like a budget. So how much can you possibly get from OSAP? So if you're single and or dependent, which is likely most of you, or you're independent, you can get up to $520 in loan amount per week. So to put that in perspective, UT school year is usually about 34 weeks long, so that can be up to $17,680. If you're married or a sole support parent, you can get a little bit more because obviously your expenses are higher with children, or if you're married, you have a bigger household to keep. So it could be up to $28,900. That's the maximum loan amount. If you qualify for some of the grants from OSAP, it could top that up a little bit. Now, if you want to get an OSAP estimate, now most of you should actually, if you apply for OSAP and it's processed to a certain point, you actually should get the actual assessment now. So you don't need to do the estimate. But if you want to, if you haven't done so yet, or you're just applying, you can ask for an OSAP estimate online through the OSAP estimator calculator. You should find this on the OSAP website. And this is kind of what it looks like. You have to give a little bit of information here. You tell them your current status, like you just came out of high school, so you're currently in high school, attending, going to either university, college, or private college, which is the type of programs OSAP covers. You can indicate whether or not you have children, indicate whether or not you're a sole support parent, or whether or not you'll be living your parent during the school year or not. And then you have to list your parents' income. Now, you have to try to be accurate of this as best you can to get the best estimate you can. They'll also ask you for the cost of university. So again, make sure you provide the correct amounts, because you overestimate, obviously you'll get a higher estimate, but it might not be the correct estimate, right? Now, again, the OSAP estimate is not the most accurate thing. It'll kind of get you in the ballpark. I wouldn't do any hard budgeting based on this, because again, if some of the information provided is incorrect, no, you can get a wildly inaccurate estimate, right? But this is a good way to kind of get a feel for OSAP. But again, if you're applying for OSAP right now, they are calculating actual assessments right now, right? So you should be able to get the actual amount instead of using estimate. So this is the timeline for you after you apply. First thing you have to do is make sure you submit your application online. Don't just save it. We have some cases where students came to us and said, oh yeah, I applied for OSAP months ago and never, nothing happened. And we checked and we noticed they they started the application and saved it, but they never clicked the submit button. So make sure you submit your application. And also you always require documents, especially for first-time OSAP applicants. So make sure you do go through the required documents section of your application and submit all of the required documents listed there. Don't miss anything, right? Don't say that, oh, I don't think this applies to me. No, if it's listed or applies to you, you have to address it at some point. If you feel it doesn't apply to you, come contact us and find out, try to figure out why you're being asked for it, and then we'll determine if it does apply to you. But in most cases, if it's showing up there, it applies to you, right? So make sure you submit it. Afterwards, OSAP will do some checks and they'll verify information with various sources. They they usually do a SIN check, a check with social insurance numbers registry. It is have done credit checks in the past, but I heard they might be moving away from that, right? But then they do all these checks. They do some checks with CRA with your parents' income as well, to make sure you don't underestimate parents' income or provide the wrong year's income. Let's say you did it by accident. They will check CRA and get the actual income and verify that, right? And then once that is all done, everything's done, you'll get an assessment calculated, and you should be able to see that online on the OSAP website. So make sure you click the button to view the funding, view your funding, and then you'll see the funding amounts and also the breakdown of funding. And also very important to note, OSAP does break down your funding. They usually release the funding in 2 main installments. About 60% of your funding up front in September in the fall term, and the remaining 40% in the winter term. Now, this is important for you because when OSAP pays money out, they will pay that 60-40 split. Because of that, the winter portion of your funding might not actually cover the winter portion of your fees, because it's a 60-40 split for OSAP, but your fees might be 50-50, or in some cases, if you have an unbalanced schedule, if you have more of your courses in the winter term than in the fall term, your fee charges for the winter term will actually be higher. So in that case, your winter portion fee OSAP will definitely be less than the amount of the fees you have to pay, because OSAP will give you more of your money up front in the fall term. So make sure you save that money in the fall term and you pay the extra portion that the winter portion of OSAP is not covering, right? So make sure you check your fee invoice to check the amounts of your fall and winter portions, and check your OSAP funding amounts to see the portions that are giving out, so that you can account for the differences that way. We always have cases where students come to us in winter and they said, hey, my OSAP didn't cover all my fees. Why did that happen? You said, well, it's because of this. You have an unbalanced schedule. More of your fees showed up in the winter term and you got your money in the fall term. But the student used all of it up because they thought, oh, I have extra money. I'm gonna go have a party with my friends, or because of extra money, and go for all these other expenses that they shouldn't be. They should be saving their money. So make sure you carefully check that if you get more money in the fall term. To make sure you have enough money to cover you for the entire winter term. So once everything's done, the university will confirm your enrollment. That is what we have to do immediately before OSAP will release money. And as I mentioned before, OSAP does not release money until closer to start of your classes in September. So enrollment confirmation won't happen until near the end of August in all cases, at the earliest, right? And then what OSAP will do is they will release a fall portion of your funding. And with that, they will also check your fee invoice, and then whatever amount you owe towards the fall portion of fees, they will deduct that amount and remit it to the university automatically. You don't have to pay the university yourself out of full-time OSAP. And then whatever, if anything's left over for the fall portion of your fees, they will then deposit that into your bank account. And that's how you get your funding. Right, so that's how OSAP works. And then come the winter term, again, we'll confirm your studies. Now, we usually do the winter confirmation sometime in early December because of the Christmas break. We're not open just immediately prior to January. So we usually confirm in early December. Right? Now, if your course load changes between when we confirm in December and January, make sure you notify OSAP in writing, right? So that we can update your course load so that, especially if you're getting a higher course load, so you can make sure OSAP gives you the extra money. Because if we confirm you in early December and at that time, let's say you're on wait list for courses and you only actually enrolled in 3.5 credits, and let's say you're on the wait list for 1.0 more credit for the winter term, right? OSAP will only give you money for those 3.5 credits that we confirmed you for. If you later get into off the wait list into that extra course so that now you're in 4.5 credits, OSAP won't automatically change your application. OSAP's not tied into the UT enrollment database. They have no idea if you added courses. You have to tell them that, right? So it's always the student's responsibility to notify OSAP of any changes to your status, either your financial status, your academic status, or your personal status. So yeah, if you add or drop courses, make sure you tell OSAP in writing. And the way to notify OSAP is to provide something in writing, a letter that you sign and date, and you upload to your OSAP file online via the required documents section. You'll see a link there for optional updates or uploads. So use that to submit these updates to your file. It's very important you do this to OSAP. Again, OSAP has no idea of changes, right? Unless we notify them, because we do run some checks throughout the year to see if you drop below the minimum course load, right? But they won't check on every student's course load because students can add and drop a course anytime. So we just can't check every student's add and drops every day, right? So it's your responsibility to tell OSAP that, and that's part of the agreements you sign to when you apply for OSAP. Okay. And yeah, eventually also comes in 2 installments, so we're done with that. The Master Student Financial Assistance Agreement. This is one of the forms you'll notice in the required documents of your OSAP file that you have to submit, and you do have to submit it. We do have some confusion with it because of the title, because students see the word master, they think, oh, I'm not a master's student, I'm a bachelor student. This doesn't apply to me. No, it does apply to you. This is actually not related to master's studies. It's the master agreement. So it's a student financial assistance agreement, and this is a master agreement, meaning you only have to do this once for your OSAP file, and then it persists for all of your OSAP applications in the future. You don't have to submit this new agreement for every year's OSAP application, but you do have to submit it for your first one. So make sure if you're being asked for this in the required documents section, you do submit it. So this is the legal agreement between you and the federal Ontario government. So it does outline your responsibility in terms of accepting and repaying student loans. So make sure you do read it and make sure you're aware of your obligations. It is a lifetime loan agreement, as we mentioned, that you have to agree to once. Now, there is some exceptions apply. The reason for this is if you actually leave university or college for at least 2 years, then they might ask you to submit a new MSFAA actually, because the agreement might kind of expire if you've been out of school for a long time. Also, be aware if you apply for full-time OSAP now and then you later apply for part-time OSAP, the 2 programs, while related, are completely separate programs with different document requirements. So part-time has a separate part-time MSFAA that you also have to complete. So if you have previously applied for full-time OSAP and you said, oh, I already got an MSFAA, I already submitted signature pages, and then you later apply for part-time OSAP and you say, hey, why are they asking me for another MSFAA? I already submitted one. It's because part-time has their own MSFAA that you do have to submit. So remember that if you're planning to apply for part-time OSAP in the future, and they ask for this, you do have to submit this, right? Or if you take a break from studies for a while, they might ask for this again. It's an online MSFAA process. So when you go onto the OSAP file and you go to the required documents, there's a link where you click to start the process. Eventually, OSAP, the National Student Loan Service Center will send you an email that will give you the an email from SLC with a link where you'll complete this process online. But you have to start it off here with your 10-digit MSFAA number, which we provided for you. And you start the process, wait for this email, and make sure you do complete it. Right, and instructions for all that will be online on the required documents section of the application. It's pretty, from what I understand, we don't have many issues with students completing it. It seems to be very straightforward, and NSLSC is very good. And just to let you know, NSLSC is the National Student Loan Service Center. They're the think of them as the bank for OSAP in this case. They're actually not OSAP itself. They're actually run by a private company that's won the contract to be the lender for OSAP loans. Right, so they operate kind of like a bank that you're borrowing money from, and eventually you'll be paying your loans back to the NSLC, which is the bank, or like a bank, right? So treat them like that. So again, if you move or so on, make sure you update the address of the NSLSC. You have questions about your loan account, check the NSLSC. Actually, don't check with OSAP because NSLC will be handling your loan account actually. Now we can handle your OSAP processing questions, right? But if you have questions about the actual loans themselves and their status, check with the NSLC instead, and they do have contact information. Okay, so again, make sure you you submit your application, submit your MSFA online. Here's kind of like a sample email, what they'll send to you about the MSFAA, just to give you an idea of what to look out for. So do check your emails, very important for you to keep track of the emails from these. Right now, don't ignore them. They could be very important because there could be something missing on OSAP. Also, we do recommend you check your OSAP file a little bit every now and then, especially your OSAP message center. Now, we do recommend you choose the option in your OSAP profile for online correspondence and not paper correspondence. Problem with paper correspondence is paper correspondence can get lost in the mail. It takes longer for you to get to it. And sometimes, let's say you did get the mail, but you lose it. Well, you don't have a copy of that message. You have no idea what the requirement is for. Then you have to ask it, and it'll just delay you. Right, and yeah, that could cause problems for your application, delays in your funding. So with online correspondence, at least you can access the message at all times on the OSAP message center, and you can react to it at any time, and you won't lose it. Right, so we do recommend you change to online correspondence if possible. Right, and do keep checking on your OSAP message center in case OSAP sends you a message because there's something outstanding in your application. Right, and that's holding up your file. So if you know that your OSAP application has been processed for a while, check the message on there. It could be something where they've asked you for something, right? So you could try to self-diagnose the problem up front. Right, oh yeah, and so actually I'm getting ahead of myself for this. So yeah, make sure you do that. The OSAP disability verification form. Okay, so if you're a student with a permanent disability, or let's say it's not permanent, but it's a pretty severe disability impacting you right now. It might not persist for your entire lifetime, but it is impacting you negatively right now. Yeah, you can get consideration for that from OSAP and also from the University of Toronto for accommodations. But you have to, again, provide this to OSAP and to the University of Toronto. You have to present yourself because we wouldn't know otherwise unless you come forward. So for OSAP, there's a specific form that you and your physician has to complete to get that registered. So that is on the OSAP website. To access the form, this is the OSAP website. So don't log in. Instead, scroll down here to this section called Resources and Forms. Make sure 2425 here is highlighted. It should default to that. And the form you're looking for is this one, the Disability Verification Form, students at Ontario Public Post-Secondary School. We're public, we're not a private institution. Those would be the private colleges. We're a public institution. Make sure you submit this form. Right, so download the form. It's a fairly long form. It's 9 pages long. You have to upload all 9 pages. You have to complete section A of the form. Make sure you sign and date the form. Also, yeah, be careful of the date. Don't put your date of birth. This is the date you signed the form. Right, so make sure you do sign it, and we do want a full signature here. If you're typing in your name instead, at least put in your full name on it. You always have to accept it, but try to put a proper signature if you can on it and the date of signing on it. This is an optional signature if you want the school to have access to this form for disability purposes, to recognize your disability. Partially, there are other methods you have to do for accessibility services, and I'll get to that in a second. This section B, is to be completed only by the medical provider, right? They have to provide, they provide your name, their name, indicate their profession. They also have to fill out this table, very important. Put in their CPSO number, right? Professional number and the address, and their professional office stamp is here. If their office doesn't have a professional stamp, OSAP does ask them to provide a sample of their official office letterhead then that they have to sign instead of the stamp, right? And make sure they have their address, and then they fill out the form to you to confirm whether or not you have a disability. Right, and determine which type. So make sure you do use this form. There are older versions of this form kind of floating around out there. Don't use those. Please do use this form that was put out. This one's published February 9, 2024. Do use the most modern version because OSAP did change the definitions of disabilities recently. Right, so the old form may not apply, and then we might not be able to process an older form. Right, so make sure you do use the most recent form, and it's right here on the website. Okay, and once you have got this down, you will upload this as an optional review document, again, via the required documents of your OSAP application online. And that's how you submit it to OSAP. Now, if you're a student with disability and you want to get accommodations for that through the university, you have to register with the university via accessibility services at the U of T. Right, that's the office here. You could quickly get to them by just Googling UTM accessibility services. And then, yeah, you just have to book an appointment and then you do register with them. OSAP appeals. So I mentioned OSAP appeals before in terms of that that student contribution. That's one example of an OSAP appeal. There are other types of OSAP appeals to try to improve the amount of OSAP funding. So, for example, I mentioned one a very popular case is living allowance. Now, I mentioned that OSAP said that by definition of the program, you're a dependent student until you've been out of high school for at least 6 years, right? Now, there is a catch to that. Let's say you decided, oh, I'm going to live away from home during the school year, away from my parents. However, if your parents live within 30 kilometers of your school that you're attending and you're a dependent student, even if you indicate in your application you'll be living away from home, the OSAP application will automatically default to giving you money for the situation where you live at home, right? And it's because dependent students whose parents live within 30 kilometers of the university are expected to live at home and commute to school at the same cost. Because as a dependent student, you have a place at home, right? You have a room, right? So they expect you to save costs because, again, they expect you to adopt a moderate standard of living, right? And that's the cheapest way to live, right? And under OSAP's their view, they say that, yeah, as long as you live within 30 kilometers or within 1 hour's travel by public transit, that's the other condition. They say that, yeah, that's reasonable for you to do that. However, if you actually do live away from your parents' home, right, you actually have to kind of submit an appeal for that extra consideration to because of the higher living away allowance. So that's a popular appeal. And that is actually found on the same page I just showed you for the forms, OSAP forms for the disability form. On the same page website, you'll find the form for the OSAP request for appeal adjust living allowance. So look for that through that same website. Right? And also, there are other examples of appeals, such as local travel. So, for example, let's say you choose to live at your parents' home, but your parents' home is actually very far away from the university. So let's say you live in Scarborough and you're coming to UTM, right? Well, you're going through several transit systems to get to UTM, and it's a very long way away, right? But you choose to live at home, which is nice for OSAP because you're saving money, but you're incurring a lot of cost. But let's say you're going on Gold Bus or Gold Train to get to UTM, and that's a higher cost than normal because OSAP usually only consider you for the cost of one public transportation service under the normal allowance. So there's an appeal for you to consider higher allowance depending because you're living far away from home. So the condition is you're more than 30 kilometers away or more than 1 hour's travel by public transit for you to qualify for this appeal. There's also a form for you to request grant funding only if you wish to do that. I usually don't recommend you do so because you also have funding is based on, it can be loans and grants, right? Yes, it's not great to get loans that you have to repay and that will be maybe interest bearing in the future, right? But it is part of your funding. And we don't have any grant funding that will replace OSAP loans if you choose to do this. So be aware that if you say that, oh, I choose not to get the loan portion of OSAP, I'll get the grant funding only. And then you come to U of T and say that, oh, I don't have enough OSAP money. They didn't give me enough. So I want a grant to do that. We'll say that, well, no, OSAP did give you enough money. They gave you a $5,000 loan and you chose not to take it. We don't replace a $5,000 OSAP money that was otherwise available for you. So you have to cover that on your own because you chose to not take $5,000 as there otherwise. Right, so be aware of that. But if you're able to manage it, let's say if you look at your OSAP funding, you notice the grant funding is sufficient, you have enough funding elsewhere otherwise somehow. I don't know, maybe you have a private loan or something. I don't know how that works, but whatever, right? If you can request grant funding only, and there's a form to request that, and you just have to upload that as well. Also, parents' estimated income. So OSAP will base their assessment based on your parents' income from the previous 2023 year, right? They don't use current year's income. The reason for that is a lot of the funding to give you in the form of grants is predicated on your parents' income level. And we don't know your parents' income level in 2024 because year's not over yet. However, parents' income tend to be pretty stable. They tend to be in stable jobs. It doesn't usually change year after year. So because parents would have filed the 2023 income tax returns already, they will check that, right? Because they can verify with CRA, they know the income level of the family, right? And that's fair. I mean, OSAP comes from taxpayers' money, and you're all taxpayers if you're Ontario residents, Canadian citizens, so on. So you don't want someone to say that, apply for OSAP and say that, oh, let's say it's Bill Gates Jr. and they say that, oh, you'll give me grants and my parent makes no income. I'm going to say in my application, my dad makes $10,000 only. So now you're going to give me a lot of grants and the taxpayers will pay for it. So you don't want that to happen, all right? Upfront, and your tax dollars going to that. So that's why OSAP does verify income, and they do calculate the grant amounts, based on the level of income for the family. Now, if your parents' income in 2024 actually is much lower than that from 2023 due to an exceptional circumstance that's non-recurring, such as your parents lost their job in 2024, so their income's lower, or in 2024, they were very ill and were unable to work for months, right? So they have lesser income because of that, right? Or they changed jobs to a lower paying job and it's a permanent change. That is the type of situation you can appeal to have OSAP reassess you based on that estimated income instead. So look for that appeal. The last part of appeal that you might see this is extenuating parental circumstance. So again, as I mentioned, if you're a dependent student, by default, OSAP will expect you to provide your parents' information. However, in exceptional, extreme situations, if there's a very difficult situation between your parent, there's a permanent fallout rift in your relationship between you and your parent. So this is at the level of like disownment, like your parents disowned you, that level of argument, right? There is a way for you to also have to consider that through this form, but it has to be a very, very serious permanent kind of, at least permanent for now type of situation for you to use this. But there is an option for that as well. As always, if you have questions about your OSAP and you want to see if there's a way to appeal to get more funding, do meet with a financial advisor to discuss your possible appeals. Okay, so now we get into minimum requirements for OSAP that you have to meet to qualify. So most of you would likely be applying for full-time OSAP at this point, likely applying, going into full-time studies. For you to be considered for full-time OSAP, you do have to be considered in full-time studies. And for OSAP, that means you must be in at least 60% of a regular full course load of study. So what's a full course load of study? So at the University of Toronto, it is a 4-year degree and you need to complete 20 credits to get that degree. So on average, that means you would take 5 credits per year. Now, we only consider the fall winter sessions in this accounting because the summer session is optional. So that means by our reckoning, 5 credits within the fall winter session is considered to be the normal full 100% course load. Now, I mentioned that OSAP considers you to be the full time to be a 60% of a regular full course load. So taking 60% of the 5.0 credits gives us 3.0 credits. So that's why you see the minimum credits to receive OSAP 60% course load in the September to April fall winter session is 3.0 credits. Now there is a condition. We notice we have this caveat here that says 1.5 credits per term. OSAP actually does work term by term. They don't work session by session. The fall winter session is actually made up of 2 terms, the fall and winter terms. So the minimum course load must be adhered to at all times, term by term. You must be in 60% at all times. So let's say you take 3.0 credits. However, you arrange them such that you take 1 credit in the fall term and you take 2 credits in the winter term. By this reckoning, you are not a full-time student by OSAP standards in the fall term, but you are a full-time student in the winter term because 1.5 credits per term is that same minimum 60% course load. So in the fall term, when you're taking 1.0, you're below this limit. You're a part-time student by OSAP's reckoning, and you're a full-time student when you're taking 2.0 credits because you're at least 1.5 credits in the winter term. Now, be aware the university definition of full-time and part-time differs from OSAP in this regard. For the University of Toronto, Mississauga, they work sessionally. So if in the fall winter session, you're enrolled in at least 3.0 credits, no matter how you arrange them within the fall winter terms, you're considered a full-time student. So you could take a half credit in the fall term and 2.5 credits in the winter term, and the UT will classify you as a full-time student for the entire fall winter session. But as we demonstrated for OSAP, OSAP will say, no, you're a part-time student for the fall term and a full-time student in the winter term at that course load. So you have to apply for OSAP appropriately. So make sure if you're planning to try to get full-time OSAP, you do take at least 3.0 credits and there are at least 1.5 credits per term, right? So normally you'll be taking more than 3 credits, like you'd likely be taking closer to 5 credits. So you likely will be taking at least 1.5 credits per term, right? So you shouldn't come across this problem. But if you're starting to reduce your course load and you do want full-time OSAP, make sure you're in 1.5 credits. Now there is a distinct advantage between full-time and part-time in that full-time OSAP, as we noted, does consider your daily living costs as a cost and will give you money for that. Part-time OSAP does not consider you for daily living costs. They only consider you for funding for for your tuition, some money for textbooks and travel to school, and that's it. Your daily living costs are your responsibility. The assumption is if you're studying part-time, you're available to work full-time. So you cover your own costs through your full-time work, right? So if you want more OSAP money, make sure, and you want full-time OSAP, make sure you take at least 1.5 credits per term. And don't go below that. And you do drop below that, you do lose your OSAP eligibility retroactively for the balance of the term. So that's very important. Right? If you are dropping, make sure you talk to us because it does affect your OSAP eligibility. If you're a student for a documented disability, either a permanent disability or that prolonged or persistent disability, you actually can access full-time OSAP at a lesser course load at 2.0 credits, 40% instead, or 1.0 credit per term. But you do have to get that form from OSAP filled out first. So make sure you do that if you're in that situation. Okay, and at the second requirement OSAP is you have to maintain this minimum course load to qualify OSAP. You must also pass at least 1.5 credits per term. Luckily, you can average out this rule. You can average out this rule to say qualify for OSAP. So again, you can't take 1 credit in the fall and 2 in the winter and say, well, I qualify for full-time OSAP for the entire session. You can't do that. You have to maintain 1.5 throughout. But this rule, luckily, you can average out over your terms. So an example of this is this. Let's say you take 5 credits, 2.5 credits per term, full 100% course load. Let's say in the first term, you blow it and you only pass one of your courses. You pass a 0.5 credit and you failed 2.0 credits in the fall. So now you think, oh no, OSAP will be unhappy with me because I need to pass 1.5 credits per term. I'm in trouble, I only passed 0.5 credit. However, you stayed in at least 1.5 credits in the fall term, so you maintain your OSAP eligibility, and now you go into the winter term, you take your second 2.5 credits, and you recover, and you pass all 2.5 credits now. Since you passed 2.5 credits in the winter term and 0.5 in the fall, that's 3.0 credits. That averages out to 1.5 per term. OSAP's now actually happy with you. They're okay with that. So you don't have to worry about that case in terms of passing the minimum requirement. You can average over all the terms in which you have received the full-time OSAP, right? Just be aware you can't do the averaging for being in a full-time course load, right? But that is always 1.5 credits per term for you to qualify to have your money. We're paying your OSAP loan. So as we mentioned, the loan portion is repayable and the provincial portion of fees does accrue interest, but it is interest-free as long as you're a full-time student. You don't have to pay it until after you stop being a student. So this is the life cycle of your loan. When you first get your loan, your full-time loan, your loan will be in interest-free non-payment status. That will persist for the entirety of your study period as long as you maintain full-time studies. Again, that's important. Again, so don't drop below 1.5 credits in any term. So as long as you do that, if you get OSAP in your first year, your loans will be interest-free from September to April, right? Presuming you study both terms. Then immediately after your full-time study period ends, your loans will enter a 6-month non-repayment grace period, right? So that's what's mentioned here. So in our example, your grace period will be from May to October, right? During those 6 months, you don't have to make any payments, hence the name non-repayment period. However, there is, oh, actually, this is wrong. This should be reversed, actually. There's no interest on the federal loan because federal loans don't have interest and Ontario loans do cover interest. So yeah, just swap these. Sorry about that. That is not correct. Ontario is charging interest. It actually used to be, a long time ago, it actually used to be the reverse. Ontario actually used to cover their interest in this period and federal did charge. Then they reversed and has been that way ever since. And then federal even got better where they don't charge any interest on loans whatsoever, right? But yeah, this is incorrect. This is reversed. So Ontario portion of your loans, if you got any Ontario loans, will start accruing interest during your grace period. But you don't have to pay anything yet because you're in a grace period. If you do return to full-time school before the end of your grace period ends, and you tell OSAP you're back in school, the government will actually pay that grace period interest for you. So very important for you if you are coming back to school the following year. So in our example, the grace period was May to October. So if you do return to school for your second year and you start in September, well, September will start before the end of your grace period. Make sure you tell OSAP you're back in school. As long as you do that before the end of October, the end of your grace period, government will pay all that interest you've been accruing over the grace period, and they will return your loans back into interest-free status. And then the cycle repeats again for your second year, right? So the way to tell OSAP you're back in school is to reapply for OSAP again, right? And then make sure that application is processed such that it is confirmed before the end of October to the following year, the second year, right? So again, that's important for you to apply early. This is one of the reasons why you have to apply early, make sure it's processed in time. If you delay and say, oh, I don't have to apply for OSAP, I don't need money, I'm gonna apply in September, well, then we might not process your application and confirm it until November, and then your loans go into repayment status. Now, if your loans do go into repayment status, let's say you don't apply for OSAP or you don't want to get OSAP, or you leave school for, you say, I'm not coming back to school in September, I'm taking a sabbatical from school for a while. your loans will actually, after the 6 months grace period ends in October, your loans will enter repayment status. That's the third state your loans can be in. Enter repayment status as of November 1st, right? The first month of the 7th month after you last attended full-time studies of a confirmed study period. And then when that happens, when your loans go into repayment status, the 6 months of interest you've been accruing becomes immediately repayable. And there are two options to repay that. Either you pay it up front in a lump sum, or you say, no, I can't pay it up front. I don't have enough money for it. I want to let it get capitalized. And you can do that. When it gets capitalized, however, that 6 months of interest is then added to the principal of your loan. And now your loan amount is higher by that amount, and then now you're paying interest on top of that interest, right? So that's what capitalizing interest means, right? And then you just start your monthly payments from November onward. So very important, if you are returning to full-time school, and it's only full-time school. If you're coming back part-time, you can't get interest-free status back on your loans. You have to be in full-time studies to get full-time loans and full-time interest-free status. Okay, I'm just getting with my to leave some time for questions. I know this is a long presentation, so I'm going to my plan was to try to finish this presentation at 1, so that we have at least half hour for questions, and I could kind of hang around until about 1:45 to try to get to all your questions. Okay, okay, so that's basically it with OSAP, and now we're going to get to the fun part, free money, scholarships and bursaries. Those of you who have applied already if you've got an interest in what you already know, will be given to you with your offer for admission to the U of T. And you apply for that when you submitted the award portfolio when you apply to U of T, right? So you can review the UTM community entrance scholarships links for more information. But yeah, mostly you would have known if you got an entrance award. There are also other awards you can apply for once you start university. These are the in-course awards. So do check our websites, the UTM Scholarships website, Tri-Campus In-Course Awards, and especially Award Explorer. Award Explorer is a listing of almost all the main scholarships around U of T for all the divisions for the most part, right? And we're a division of U of T, of course, right? So make sure you check this. These are annual awards offered, and there are lots of awards. There is a filter on this listing, so make sure you filter to get rid of all the entrance awards because you're not going to be considered for entrance awards at this point. So get rid of them. Make sure you only search for in-course awards. There are also filters for international students and domestic students as well. So to try to pare down the listing, but there's still a ton of awards for you to go through. So we do recommend you do this on your own time, and highly recommend that you can go through the whole listing. I know it's a bit of work to do that. It might take you a few hours to get through the listing, but it's good research because you can apply for these year after year, right? So you try to get extra money to supplement your OSAP funding. Grants and bursaries, the other type of free money you can apply for, right? So we do recommend everybody apply for this. Now, grants and bursaries are needs-based awards. You have to demonstrate financial need to qualify for these. So the main way you demonstrate financial need is to apply for OSAP, and you have demonstrated financial need. That is actually the test we use to see if you have financial need, or if you get out-of-province funding. Unfortunately, international students don't qualify for grants and bursaries because international students have to demonstrate to the government of Canada they have enough funding to cover all of their costs to come to school here before they come here and get their student visa. So since they demonstrate by virtue of them getting the visa and being here, they've already demonstrated they already have enough money to go to school. So they have demonstrated no need, right? So unfortunately, you can't apply for the grants and bursaries here. Applications are required for these. There are two main grants we do. Actually, there are three. One's not quite listed here. I guess the third one's not quite main. Main one is the UTM undergraduate grant. It is the link for it is here, and it will start up after school starts. So don't apply for it now, even though the application is available now. The application itself is a universal application for all grants at the U of T, not just UTM. So different divisions might have applications starting up now. Some of them might have summer grants available to them, right? So that's why the application is available for use. But if you submit a grant now, it won't be looked at really, or we might ignore it because we don't look at grants until after school starts. So please do wait until after the start of classes to submit your application. The other application is UTAPS. This is short for the University of Toronto Advanced Planning for Students. And this is kind of tied into your financial need for your OSAP or out-of-province funding. This one you can apply for right now, right? And we do suggest you do apply for it, right? So this, because as I mentioned, OSAP is limited. They have kind of preset budgets for some of your costs, right? But if your reality is that you actually do have higher costs, so let's say you're in residence, right? So you're incurring that higher cost, OSAP won't look at it. right? But you might be able to get a little bit of consideration through UTAPs here for that higher cost, right? Not all, but necessarily, because again, it is beyond the normal allowance for consideration for living costs. But at least, if you get partial consideration, it's better than no consideration. So do make sure you apply for UTAPs here. Yeah, oh, and the UTM grant. The third grant I mentioned, which is, well, it's not like a main grant, but it's not listed here. It's a student union. So just Google utmsu.ca for the student union and look for the services, and you should be able to see links for the bursaries they provide. Student unions actually run off the incidental fees that you pay for, right? And so they give back to students by providing bursaries and grants that you possibly can apply for during the school year. So for that, you just have to research on their website. They tend to have very tight deadlines, so make sure you do check the website very early. And also because they're run by students, and the students, as you know, will be busy in the first couple of weeks of school. They might not update their website right away. So do keep checking it in September, especially closer to the middle and end of September, to see the updated for the next bursary. We usually typically see the fall bursary show up sometime in late September, early October, but the deadline's usually in early October. Right, so make sure you do check the website to make sure you don't miss that application. So again, it's utmsu.ca. Just Google that. And that's the UTM Student Union. Okay, now we get to financial planning and the resources. RESP. So this is something your parents would have enrolled you in when you were born, hopefully, because they're planning for your education. So basically, you put away money and the government matches their contribution. And this goes into an account that basically gets interest because it's in investments and so on. And then the RSP that you'll be using is the amount of that interest you've been accumulating all that time for 18 years. So hopefully it's a very sizable amount of money that you can use to help you supplement your OSAP. Luckily, OSAP does not require you to list the amount of your RESP in the application, so it does not factor against you in your OSAP application. So you can use RESP and you can use OSAP at the same time. For the RESP, usually the financial institution will require you to get something filled up by the university to confirm your enrollment. Please follow the instructions that your financial institution that's holding your RESP to see what they want you to do. If it's a form they want us to fill out, do submit it to us. Do not submit it to the financial aid team, however. We don't do it. It's actually something that's performed by the frontline staff for filling out forms. So please do look for that option when you do submit a request for that. And to submit a request for one of these RESP forms to be filled out, it is actually through Ask Registrar on our website, and then do send it to our frontline staff for completion of forms. Right? So it's kind of like a registration type of request in terms of how it's arranged on Ask Registrar. The UTM Career Center, we do highly recommend everyone register at the Career Center. They're very good. Basically, they're there to kind of keep you on track in terms of your studies and make sure whatever you're studying is what you need to do to get to your to the career you want to do. Because you might have an idea right now, you say, oh, I want to be, so-and-so profession, so I think I need to do this degree, right? It could be the completely incorrect degree, or maybe you need extra credentials or so on, right? Or you need to be specialized in something different. Make sure you check in with them. They'll let you know. They work backwards. They'll say that, okay, what kind of job do you want? And they'll work backwards that and say that, oh, okay, for that you need this type of certificate or this type of master's, and then to get that master's, you need this bachelor's degree, and so on. So make sure you do check that, right? Check in with them, and they usually want you to check in with them at least once a year to make sure you're on track. They also have other benefits that will help you with resume writing, interview skills to prepare for job interviews, right? Right, so they have workshops for that and so on. So very useful to help you prepare, for the working life, right? This is also where you find listings for jobs throughout the year, including work studies, jobs on campus. Very, very nice. Looks great on your resume because you get your T on your resume, right? So that helps you with your resume. So make sure you do check in with them. Other resources you can consider: Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. They have a financial literacy self-assessment quiz. Very good. We want all students to be financially literate. Make sure you're budgeting correctly. They have a sample budget calculators you can use, a few toolkits, just to make sure, because you might have an idea of what it costs to go to school. You think you have enough money, but it might be wrong. Because usually I would say that whatever you budget, you should probably add it at least, I would say 25% to that. Just to cover extra things you might not have thought of, or some of the expenses you might have undercut a little bit. So I would say go through this website. They have a lot of useful tools for you, right? Just make sure you're on track. Other online tools we do expect you to do. So make sure there are lots of budget templates and apps you can find online. Make sure when you do shop, do comparison shopping. Don't just buy whatever you want. I know at the first store you get, right? I know you want it, but no, check stores and you might find a cheaper deal elsewhere and always save money, right? Find deals. This is the only time in your life where anyone will care that you have no money, right? Because there are some stores that will give you money or discounts because you're a student. So ask for a student discount, right? Kind of drives me nuts because I always see some students in high school, they always pay the adult fare. I don't know, maybe they want to feel like they're an adult, even though they're in high school, but the student fare is half the cost of adult fare. Why are you paying double the fare, right? I mean, it's kind of like saying, I always tell high school students, well, they give you this deal. If you were to go on this bus, right, here, and then show me a card and pay $2, I'll give you back $1. Would you do that? Everyone would say, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, if I give $2 to go on a bus and I show you a card and you'll give me back $1, I'll do that. Well, why don't you do that in the first place? That's student fare, right? That's discount. Why are you paying double the fare when you don't have to? So yeah, ask for student discounts anywhere you go to, and you'll just save money. Also, take get some spending trackers for yourself and make sure you keep track. Especially now, you likely will be getting your first access to credit cards when you get university, and it's very easy to lose track of how much you're spending because it's not taking off your bank account. It's actually a better idea for you not to use credit cards if at all possible. One of the main tools, we recommend you still use debit if you can't pay for everything, because at least you can track what you're spending very easily because you can see how much money you have left in your bank account. With credit cards, it's very easy to overspend and suddenly realize, oh, I can't pay off my credit card, right? But then again, it's a useful tool. Now, credit cards are useful to get now. If you're able to manage your spending and you keep track of it well, it's a good way to build up your credit rating, right? As long as you pay your credit card balance off at all times. So that is useful for you for the future. And again, always go for price matching, download any coupon you can find. Again, your goal is to save money because again, the money you get from OSAP is limited. The money you can get from grants is limited, right? So potentially not all your costs might be met through OSAP in the school, and you might have to cover some money out of pocket. Have a financial plan. Always make sure you have a plan coming in. Don't create your plan once you're here because again, that might be too late. And always ask about deadlines and so on, other sources of funding you might have, and review your plan. Make sure it's working, because it might not be working mid-year, and then you might have to make an adjustment. So always make sure you review your plan. Right, and again, yeah, just common stuff like reasonable spending limits for yourself. Like now, we don't want you to just be shuttered in the library and not go out every week for entertainment. You need to decompress, so you do have to, but you have to account for the cost for that. So if you need to go out with friends, go to a movie, that's fine. I wouldn't say go pay for a Taylor Swift concert every month because no one can afford that, right? But do what you can. Make sure you're within your budget. EcoConnect designed to help your transition to university be as successful as possible. So make sure you do go through that website. Lots of modules there. University is intimidating. So especially for those who are single students or maybe you're the eldest first one at university, it can be intimidating. There's a lot to know. There's a lot to read. So make sure you do sign with that. And then you try to meet with peers, right? And then they can help you out to kind of get you used to the university, living in university, things you have to know. Very, very useful. Okay, and basically that's it for the presentation. This is 1:04 now, so we got time for questions. So I'm gonna open it up for questions.
Francis, let me
Yes.
interrupt for a minute. Just for students who are asking about the launch program, those courses are free. So if they see it that it's on their invoice with the charge, the records team will be removing that charge.
Oh, okay,
So yes, so launch courses, if you have questions, you can send us a ticket, but they are looking at it and you can check your invoice next week. And if it still hasn't been removed, then send us a ticket through Ask Registrar, but they're aware of it.
Okay. Just to let you know, some of the UTM Connect courses, it's called UTM-1 courses, some of them actually do have charges, and then some of the higher level ones, that's very wide. So this must be kind of a mix-up where they charged everybody these courses. There are some of the basic ones that don't have charges, some of them do actually have charges.
Okay.
So we'll have to see if you're in one of those courses that actually do have a charge, but you do, I believe you get a credit for that, the ones that do charge. Okay, so Lucas, if I can ask you to kind of help me kind of sort through all the questions, and then we'll answer them, the general ones.
So the first question, someone's asking about how to apply for an international fee exemption.
Okay, So for that, basically, if you're an international student, you are charged international fees, which are much, much, much higher than the fees for domestic students. Now, you have to qualify certain conditions, and they are listed on a website. So the best way to do it is go through student accounts website, and we were on that before, where making a fee. So if you go back here and go into tuition and fees, there's a section for international fee exemption. Right, so this will determine who is exempt from international fees. So if you're a dependent of a Canadian citizen or Indigenous person, or dependent on permanent resident of Canada, you're a person who's been approved in principle for permanent resident status already. So you have to have documentation of that. Or you're a visitor with a work permit. Now, only specific work permit has to be. I think it was a closed work permit, so the term for it, meaning a specific company, let's say, has hired you. And the company is situated in Canada, so you have to come to Canada to work, and that's why that's that type of work permit. Can't be an open work permit where you just work anywhere. It has to be that specific situation where it's a closed work permit. Then that allows you, because you can only then work in Canada, so you're forced to be here. So that's why it's similar as this case, you're a visitor with diplomatic status, or sometimes like we have clergy. Let's say you're the dependent of a clergyman who's stationed in Canada now, or you're dependent of a parent who's a diplomat and stationed in Canada. That's that reason, that person has no option but to be in Canada now. So that's why they'll give you an exemption on that basis, because you can only go to university because you're following your family to come to Canada to study. You can get it for that case. So make sure you follow these directions and go down here, and they'll tell you the types of documentation you must get for each of those situations. So make sure you read this very carefully and provide the documentation they want you to provide. And it is very specific. And I believe to submit the request, I think you to take it through us and we can look at it that way. And that should be the way to ask for the international fee exception. Lucas?
Somebody asked if OSAP partially covers my fees and I'm not able to pay for the rest of the fees by the deadline, what are my options?
Okay, so as I mentioned, as long as you defer your fees via the OSAP fee deferral, you're registered for the entire session. So it doesn't actually matter if you don't pay your fees at all after that happens. You're registered, you'll stay registered, and we will not remove you from classes for not paying. You can even add more courses and incur higher charges, and we'll still not remove you from your registration in your courses. So at least you can take your classes for the entire session. However, we did mention that you are still responsible for your fee charges after that, and we mentioned the service charges. So whatever amount you have not paid towards your fees will be subject to those service charges. So again, starting middle of October, whatever you haven't paid to the fall fees will start incurring a monthly service charge. Whatever you haven't paid towards your winter fees, starting in the middle of February, will start incurring a service charge. And basically by the end of April 2025, which is the deadline for you to pay your fees, if you have not paid off all your fees and all the added service charges on top of that, then we refuse further registration. You will lose your access to your transcripts. Right, and if the monthly service charges will actually keep continuing, and until such time you pay everything off, and this will persist for 1 year. And if after 1 year after that you still haven't paid off everything, your account actually goes to a collection agency. Now the interest charges will stop, or the service charges will stop, but now a collection agency hounds you day and night to collect. So it's not a great, and then your credit rating suffers because of that. So it's not a great situation, but hopefully it doesn't come to that. So all you need to do, if your OSAP doesn't cover everything, you just have to find a way, other means to get money to pay for it. So maybe find some part-time work, apply for grants, apply for scholarships, right? See what you can, borrow money from the bank if you have to do that to cover it. But then you have to deal with the bank's interest rate. You could get lines of interest from bank as well to supplement OSAP. It doesn't count against your OSAP because those are loans. Right, but you do have to worry about interest. Some student lines of credit don't charge you the principal during the period when you're in school. So you can try to see if you can find that. But again, student lines of credit tend to have higher interest rates, however, than normal lines of credit. So the pluses and minuses with that. But if that's the only way you can get money, that might be the way to do it. Okay, next.
Somebody asked if I do a fee deferral, what should be the future date to pay the OSAP money after you received it?
Okay, so that was kind of covered with my last question. So again, it's up to you when you pay, right? But again, if you don't want to get a service charge, make sure you pay off all your fall fees by the end of, well, we recommend by the end of September to allow you grace time for it. The service charge is coming on October 15th, right? So if you're banking at a Canadian bank, then and since it only takes 3 business days, you could wait until a week before middle of October to pay instead of end of September. But again, try to pay as early as you can just to make sure, because again, if there's an unknown bank holiday and they don't process your bank payment and you miss that the October 15th date, and we don't get the money, you get a service charge, right? So to avoid service charge or minimize your service charges, try to pay as much as you can for your fees before the date the service charges are applied. And then that way you'll avoid this charge. Otherwise, it's up to you when you pay, right? Just be cognizant you'll carry extra charges if you delay in paying. And then the ultimate deadline is that April 30th deadline date, because if you don't pay by then, you're not able to come back to URT. Well, until you pay in the future. Next question, please.
Somebody asked, what's the process for a fee deferral for international students receiving a third-party scholarship?
Oh, okay. So for third party, you have to actually arrange that through student accounts. You have to contact student accounts for third party sponsorship, right? So there should be an FAQ section in the student accounts website. See, FAQ, and I believe it's one of those things there. Yeah, third party sponsor or payer questions. So go through them. And that's a website. Yeah, send an email to that address. Okay, Lucas.
Somebody's wondering for the tuition fee deferral, when you're deferring for a scholarship on the form, are they supposed to add attachments to provide proof, or do they just submit the form?
They need attachments to confirm the scholarship. If it's a URT entrance award, then they shouldn't need to, although it'd be nice if they do. If they have to request it, make it easier. But if it's a URT award, it's not they kind of mention it is in the request, we should be able to find it. Right, so it should be fine. If it's an external award, then definitely they have to upload a copy of confirming that they are in receipt of it and the dates they're in receipt of it, because we don't have information about external awards.
Another person asked, in terms of a fee deferral, if you're waitlisted for some courses, does this change anything? And
no, okay, yeah. So I actually mentioned that in the presentation, but if you defer and you register officially, your deferral holds, even if you add courses afterwards. Once you're registered officially, the registration always holds, right? Unless there's something really weird about you and the university for some reason deregistered you for a different reason because of a sanction, right? But otherwise, under normal situations, once you're registered based on your current situation, it holds even if you change your academic situation in terms of a number of courses you have later on, right? Or unless you fully withdraw all your courses, then you actually cancel your registration. Right, but as long as you maintain a course, right, you can add as many courses as you want after that, right? Your fees will go up and your registration remains, right? So that doesn't matter. You just have more fees to worry about.
Somebody asked, does the scholarship count as income for tax purposes?
So that's a tax question. That's not really for us. So what I do recommend for students, it depends on the scholarship and the basis of the scholarship. Some are exempt from taxes, some are not exempt from taxes. Usually you have to have a needs-based award for it to be exempt from taxes. So what I recommend students actually do is look this up. There's a very handy guide. Well, this is for Canadian citizens. It's called a P105. Oh, notice form. It's very useful. There's this handy guide for students. PDF version of it. There's an entire section in there about, where does it go? Scholarships, bursaries, and study grants, and specifically scholarship exemption. Make sure you read this in this guide. So basically, if we go there, very basically, scholarship exemption allows you to exclude from income all or part of the amounts you received in the year as scholarships, fellowships, or other related to your employment, business, bursaries, artist project grants, etc. For you, who qualifies would be a post-secondary school that consists mainly of research, which is the U of T, right? And you're getting a diploma and bachelor's, which is U of T, what you're doing, right? And provided you're full-time qualifying, that's the qualifier. Make sure you're full-time, not part-time. So again, remember, you're taking 3.0 credits during the fall-winter session, you're a full-time student at U of T, right? So as long as you meet all these conditions, you qualify for the exemption, you don't have to report on your taxes. So use that as your guide. P105. And this is from CRA. Okay, so for you, you probably have to look for next year's one. Actually, no, I guess it does apply for 2023. You heard. Oh, sorry, you had to use 2024. Sorry, we're in 2024. Sorry, I forgot what year we're in. Hate OSAP going back 1 year. Okay, next question, please, Lucas.
Someone's wondering how they use the UTAPS grant.
I'm not sure what do you mean by, can you clarify what you mean by using the, do you mean how to apply for the UTAPS grant or what do you mean
Yeah,
by
I think they mean by like how to apply it.
Okay, so UTAPS grant applications just through the website. So there's an easy link for our website. If you go, oh, sorry, not forms requests. Go under here. This menu button is always here on our website. If you click on our website normally, you always see this menu button here at the top with the 3 lines. Click on it. Go into finances. Click the down arrow for this. Don't click the tile here just to get this. And then you see the grants and bursaries. Now from here, do click the tile, not the down arrow. It's kind of weird, but that's the way it goes. From here, we should have a listing for the grants. And there's UTAPS. Get you to the page. Right, and then all you do is follow the links, all you apply. You do have to apply for OSAP though, make sure you can submit the grant application. They will check to make sure you've applied for OSAP. Or out of province funding as well. Right, so that's important as a side, it's kind of like a concurrent application. Right, because they do ask you in UTAP's application how much funding you're getting from your government program. They will check it eventually. You have to provide documentation for it if you're out of province. You do not have to provide documentation if you're getting OSAP because we get data from OSAP directly. We don't get data from out of province programs. However, that's why you have to provide some documentation for that application. But that's it. Just submit the application through here. And the links will be through here. Just follow these links. Hopefully that helped. I don't know. Do you have a follow-up question or have you tried these links and it didn't work somehow? Yeah, if you have other questions about it, please submit a further question to follow up. Yeah, Lucas, may I have the next question, please?
Someone's wondering how they pay for their residence fee. Is it included for the minimum amount in the fall?
Yeah, only if it shows up. Residence fees usually show up a lot later than the course fees. Now, usually I found them showing up kind of the first portion, the fall portion of residence fee showing up in mid to late August. Right, and then the rest of the fees kind of shows up in September, October for the winter portion. So it depends on when the office, the student housing adds them onto your invoice. So hint, if you look at your invoice now and they're not on and you're trying to get into residence and you're trying to register, if you pay the minimum payment, it shows right now, let's say you're registering that way and not using a fee deferral. If you pay the minimum payment now and it's received and you register, remember I mentioned once you register. So if the residence fees show up afterwards on your fee, you don't have to pay those, at least not upfront. You'd have to pay them eventually, yes. Right, they're part of your tuition fees that'll show up on your invoice, but it doesn't impact you on your registration. You're registered, you stay registered, you go to residence too. Right, so that's kind of a hint. If you are planning to get a residence and they're not showing up yet and you have money to pay your minimum payment, do it now and you'll be registered. Right, if they do show up later, you haven't registered, then the minimum payment wouldn't include the fall part of your residence fees. And usually the fall part of residence fees is about $10,000 at least. So that's a big hike in the amount you have to pay. Now it does help you because it is something you have to pay eventually. So you don't have to worry about incurring service charges on it later if something happens and you can't pay it. Right, so it's kind of peace of mind. But yeah, now if you're getting a fee deferral, you don't have to worry about paying anything up front. Remember, fee deferral handles your registration. All you have to do is after you register, you then have to pay your fees. And then if whatever you're owing at the time, middle of October, that's subject to service charges. So the residence fees show up by then. Yeah, that's required because that will incur a service charge. So it's up to you how to arrange your payment of fees to avoid service charges. But you won't get deregistered for not paying. You just get service charged. Lucas?
Somebody's wondering what the difference is between the August 27th and September 30th payment deadlines.
Oh, okay. So the August 27th is the actual registration deadline. So you have to be registered in your courses by August 27th. If you haven't either you haven't selected your fee deferral by then, or you haven't paid a minimum payment by then, or use the proof of payment if you're paying late, you will be deregistered from your courses on August 28th. So you've kicked off your classes, right? So that's not good. And then you have to undergo the late registration. There is a late registration administrative fee for that goes up every day you delay. I think it starts at $45 or $49 and goes up like $5 every day you delay, right? So you pay even more to come back, and also you might not get back into your classes because the class might be full at that point, and so you lost your class. So always make sure you meet the August 27th the first registration deadline date. The September 30th date is actually not a deadline date, right? That's kind of like the August 14th date we set out, right? It's a suggested payment date. So if you've already registered, right, via minimum payment, or you did the OSAP fee deferral, right? And let's say if you did the minimum payment, but you added courses to the fall term, so you have higher fees for fall, you now have an unpaid fees. Usually the minimum payment would be all of your fall term fees. But if, let's say you added a course, let's say you were on a wait list and then you got into a course now afterwards, that's a new charge that will be added to your fees that has been paid with your minimum payment. So that is a charge. So we want you to cover these charges, try to pay by the end of September 30th, so that you don't get a service charge. So think of September 30th as the date to pay to avoid service charges, but you're not in any danger of losing your registration by not paying by September 30th. Because again, once you're registered, you're registered. Right? You remain registered for the entire session. If you don't pay anything else to the URT, it's just that you keep getting service charge and then you won't be able to come back to URT afterwards. You don't pay it off and then you keep getting further service charges. And hopefully that answers the question.
The next question, you may have answered it during your presentation, but I think it came in before you got to that point.
Okay.
So I guess just to reiterate, someone said, is completing the MSFAA online process required if you want to receive a grant?
Yes, it's required for you to get OSAP, period. Basically, MSFAA is required. That's to tell you're setting up your bank account with the National Student Loan Service Center with the MSFAA. That's the purpose of the MSFAA. So remember, OSAP, the National Student Loan Service Center, is the one that will be distributing the money. They need to know where to send the money to, right? So if they don't have your bank account, they can't give it to you. Like if you want your money from OSAP, you give them your banking information so they can deposit it in your bank account. That's the purpose of the MSFAA. And it's also your agreements for everything else to accept so that you can get OSAP.
Somebody asked if you're in a deregulated program, will OSAP cover the higher fees?
Okay, so this is a problem with OSAP. OSAP does not recognize the higher cost of deregulated fees programs. So this is very important for you to apply for UTAPs, because this is one of the functions of UTAPs. UTAPs does consider the kind of this unmet cost from OSAP. So these are one of the cases that UTAPs will target specifically for unmet need. Because part of OSAP actually does, the Ontario portion of OSAP does not recognize the regulated fee costs. And you might actually notice that your OSAP for your deregulated program is less than the amount of OSAP you got when you were not yet in your program. So remember, you're not in your program yet in first year. You're a normal regular UTM program, normal fees, course by course, not program fees. If you get into your deregulated program in second year, you might actually notice when you apply for OSAP, your OSAP is less than it was in your first year. And that's because part of OSAP didn't recognize your fees. Now, provided your parents' income isn't super high, and that which might mitigate UTAP's grant and your financial need, UTAP's grant is there to help you kind of consider that amount that OSAP is no longer considering. Okay, so very important for you to apply for UTAPs when you get into your deregulated fees programs to get that extra grant consideration. Again, this is not a promise you will get the money for UT because it is all calculated and it's based on your financial need as calculated through your application. So make sure you make sure the application is accurate and correct. Right, and you do have to apply for OSAP every year still to qualify for UTAP. So it's a combination of OSAP, UTAPs is what you use to help you. And yeah, hopefully that does help you cover your the regulated fee portion of your costs. Next question, please, Lucas.
Somebody said on Acorn under the net cost tab, it says they don't have access to see this information because they're not eligible for OSAP, but they want to apply for OSAP, so they're not sure like if there's a workaround.
So don't worry about the net cost view at this point. The net cost view is kind of more like a planning tool for you to finance the year in a more general sense. The net cost view basically it kind of shows what your total tuition fees are at the time. And also the expected amount of OSAP that will be coming, right? And the amount of grants that might have already been considered for you. And then they'll calculate whatever's left over, and that's what you're expected to pay out of pocket. So that's the purpose of net cost view, to kind of demonstrate your out of pocket costs to go to university this year, right? It's not really a great plan to see how much you still owe to UT because it's not great in doing that. But that I would always suggest to use the invoice actually, because that is actually the amount of fees owing. And if there's a delay on OSAP or OSAP gets changed or OSAP sends money somewhere else, like they might send it into your bank account instead of to university, and that kind of changes what the net cost view should be. Like it kind of could change that. So don't worry too much about net cost view. It's not really used for anything other than kind of like planning out your year to see how much money you might need to save up for the year out of pocket that to cover that OSAP and your grants won't cover. And that's the purpose of that. So if you haven't applied for OSAP yet, obviously you can't access net cost view because they can't calculate anything because they don't know if you're getting OSAP, right? But it's not needed at this point, right? So basically, if you're not getting OSAP, you owe everything that's showing on your fee invoice. There's no need for net cost view, but you owe everything, right? So don't worry about net cost view. It has no impact on you whether or not you can apply for OSAP or not apply for OSAP. All you do to apply for OSAP is apply for OSAP. Right? Go on OSAP's website. They're separating OSAP from UT. It's not a UT program. It's a government program to get loans. Think of OSAP as a way for you to get money to pay, help you pay towards your university, right? So that's one of your resources. The other resource is your own money, right? If you have money in your bank account, take it out, pay UT. Your parents have money, take that money, get some money from your parents and pay UT. So use all these resources to pay UT. So hopefully that answers your question.
Somebody asked if you've already received an estimate for UTAPs, will it automatically be put into your account, or like
Yeah,
do you
so
have to follow up?
No, you don't have to follow up. UTAPs is automatic. So if you already apply for UTAPs and it's giving you estimate, it sounds pretty good. Sounds like the application is okay and they're able to assess it, right? So now the actual final amount of UTAPs might differ, might be more than the estimate. So if that's the case, you'll get more. But my understanding is you should at least get the estimate amount at the very least. And the way they release UTAPs is usually in two main installments. The first one usually comes out in October. The other one comes in February. There might be a middle one sometimes in December, depending on the amount of UTAPs you have. If it's a sizable amount, they might give you a third installment extra just before Christmas break to kind of help you out, right? But usually it's in two main installments, one in February, one in, February, yes, and one in October. But yeah, so if you got an estimate of UTAPs, you at least know you got some money. All you have to do is stay in school, to stay in full time to qualify for it. That could wreck your UTAPs. If you don't stay full time, you lose your UTAPs. And that's oh, sorry. Yeah, actually, that's all I need to say about that. Okay, may I have the next question, please, Lucas?
Someone saying, is UTAPs a guaranteed scholarship?
It's not a scholarship, it's a grant. It's never guaranteed, right? But we will consider it for you as long as you qualify for it, right? So you have to be on OSAP or out of province funding, and you have to submit your application for it to be considered, right? And then it's based on the merits of the application. May I have the next question, please, Lucas?
Yep. Just taking a look because there's quite a few here. Someone says, if you use the OSAP fee deferral, once you receive your OSAP funding, do you use it to pay the minimum registration?
Okay, so what you do with the OSAP money is you try to pay the fees to avoid service charges and leave money for yourself for other costs, because you don't have to pay the winter portion of fees just yet, right? So there's no point in you paying money to pay that part. However, you have other costs when you go to school. So you have books costs, right? You might have rent to pay, right? So make sure you set aside money for that. So what usually happens is OSAP will automatically deduct amounts to pay the fall portion of your fee. And normally, if everything works out properly, it doesn't always happen, right? But it should. We would deduct the amount of money that would exactly match the amount of fall portion of fees, provided the fall portion of your OSAP does cover the fall portion of your fee charges. Now, that might not always be the case because, again, OSAP is a needs-based program, and they might consider you have enough money based on your parents' income or your own income, right? And they'll give you less OSAP money. So in that case, you have to pay out of pocket for anything OSAP doesn't cover. So what you should do is check your fee invoice, right, to see how much money has been paid towards your fall fees, and then if anything's left over, you have to pay the difference. Right? And there's actually instruction on student accounts website to determine the remaining balance of your fall fees. Unfortunately, it's not listed for you because once you actually do register, the minimum payment to register amount disappears from OSAP. Whoever's unmuted themselves can ask you to mute yourself. It's very noisy, so I'm not sure everyone can hear me. I think it's you, Christian. Can you kind of mute yourself again? Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it was kind of noisy in the background, so hopefully everyone heard that. Actually, let me show you. So on student accounts website, where did they put it? I think it's here. Where did they put it? That one. Okay, maybe they put it here. Okay, I'm pretty sure they put it in here. Let's see. No, that's not the case. Okay, maybe. it is
Francis,
then.
I do have something that I put together very
you?
briefly to show how students calculate the
Yeah.
outstanding fall term fees. I'll share with everybody.
Okay, I'll let Jennifer do it. There was something on student council website. Yeah, to kind of, I keep getting where they put it, but it's a nice handy guide for them how to calculate it. The student invoice is not very good about that, unfortunately. It doesn't actually show the remaining amount owing. You actually have to kind of work it out yourself. It's not that hard to work it out. It's just not very convenient. Okay, but thank you, Jennifer. I'll leave you to do that. Okay, Lucas, may I please have the next question?
Somebody asked, are loan payments supposed to be made with the National Student Loan Services Center?
Yes. So once you get into actual loan repayment, if you go into repayment status, all your payments will be made towards the National Student Loan Service Center. And then, yeah, you could check their website out to see how they would do it. They usually automate it, right? Because once they have your bank account information through your OSAP application, right, and the MSFAA, basically they'll just deduct money out of that bank account when you go into loan repayment. So there's usually not a lot for you to set up when you go to the loan repayment. There will be a loan consolidation agreement form they will send you that you have to complete and sign if you want to change some of your options. But then there's also an automated loan repayment schedule that you're automatically enrolled into initially. And then you agree to it with signing the MSFAA actually to that. So if you don't change your options through the loan consolidation agreement, right, they'll just enroll you to that automated form. They'll automatically start debiting your bank account that you have associated with your MSFAA. Yeah, so that's how repayment work, but it is to the National Student Loan Service Center. They're the lender. Yeah, the next question, please, Lucas.
Those are all that are in the general chat. Maybe if you
Oh.
want to answer, there's two people who raised their hand.
Okay,
Maybe if they
yeah,
want to like unmute and ask.
sure, please. So Khalid, I see your hand raised. If you'd like to unmute and ask your question live to everyone, that'd be fine.
Yes, thank you very much. So, sorry, my question is, when will we be able to pay for residence and meal plan? When invoice will be posted?
It depends on when student housing will post it. Usually we find the fall portion of the charges for your residents shows up in usually late August, I've seen. Right? It sometimes doesn't show up until September. So it's kind of good that it doesn't show up. It means you don't have to worry about it until it shows up. Right, but do keep an eye on your invoice. Once it does show up, you have to make sure you do cover it so you don't get that service charge. So it usually would show up by September, right? And remember, you have to pay everything to avoid the October service charge. So I would at least check in middle of September to see if it shows up, and then make arrangements to start paying it, because you want to pay it off by the end of September to ensure you don't owe anything by middle of October for the service charge. But again, if you're not able to pay it off, you don't have to worry. You won't be kicked out of residence. Right, you just will have a service charge, right? But the service charge will be pretty high. So let's say, for example, the fall portion of your service, your residence charge is $10,000. 1.5% of that is $150. That's like a textbook, right? Or a lot of nice dinners for you. So you don't want to incur that cost, right? So
All right, sorry,
hopefully, yeah, you set aside your money for that. So yeah, that's kind of like the schedule you look for your charges.
maybe it's not maybe I missed something, but where can it be posted?
It'll be on your student account.
In the
So your fee invoice, check for your fee invoice. It'll show up there at some point in the future. And then you just pay your fees. Yeah, you just pay your fees. It'll be part of your fee invoice, as long as your tuition fees.
And yes, thank you very much.
No problem. Do you have a follow-up question?
So yes, I forgot. Oh yes, I just had a question and I forgot.
Okay, you want to think about it for a second so we can let the next student ask their question?
Yes, I will just raise a hand again
Okay.
when I will remember. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Khalid. Victoria?
Yeah. So my OSAP won't arrive until the end of August. So can I apply for bursaries in September?
sorry.
And then
I'm sorry, could you say, so you apply for OSAP, you can apply for OSAP in August, and what do you want to do in September?
my OSAP will arrive at the end of August. So can I apply for bursaries and then use that to pay OSAP after
Sorry, you want to apply for, I missed that.
So my OSAP won't arrive until the end of August. So I can use, but the amount is not the full amount I need to pay for that says on my Acorn. So can I use the bursaries to pay for the full amount that's
Oh,
on my Acorn?
bursaries. Okay, so bursaries are never guaranteed, right? But you should definitely apply for them. Now, again, if you apply for UTAP's UTM grant, the grant, unfortunately, the UTM grant won't be issued until January. So you won't get a UTM grant. You can apply for it, but you usually don't issue it. But UTAPs will come out early, so make sure you do apply for that. If UTAPs comes out in October, it will go into your student account automatically, and it will go towards paying any outstanding fee charges. And usually they try to pay it out in early October, so ahead of that October service charge. So hopefully you won't get any service charges. It's not guaranteed, but they do try to arrange the time frame for that for students to avoid the service charge, right? So that is the plan. But unforeseen things can happen to the UTAS program. Hopefully not this year. And the fact that some students have gone to estimates is good. Seems like the UTAS program is working okay, right? But strange things can happen. So we can't promise that it will come out. But that's the idea. You get your OSAP money and then you get UTAPs. Hopefully you qualify with UTAPs. Now you said that the fall portion of your OSAP did not cover your fall portion of fees. So for that question, I might ask you to send a personal message to either Bridget or Jennifer to kind of figure out why, because it could be you didn't qualify for OSAP because they think your parents have too much money or you have too much money, in which case you have to pay out of pocket for the amount that OSAP isn't covering. And that also could result in lesser amount of grant funding coming to you because you have a lot of money, right? So again, so for that type of consideration, we don't want your personal information to be considered held here in the open forum. So I might ask you to, can you send a personal message to either Jennifer or to Bridget, and so they could kind of take a look at your OSAP application and see why that might be that your OSAP isn't covering anything, or maybe there's an appeal or something, there's probably the application, there's incorrect information that can be easily corrected.
Because I thought I went on OSAP and I saw the email that the fund was calculated and the amount that was there was not the full amount that's shown on Acorn. So
Yeah, again, so that's why I want you to check with Bridget and Jennifer. Said again, they can first look into your OSAP file and see if there's something that's made this a mismatch between your course load. Maybe you told OSAP you're taking a 60% course load, but you're enrolled at 100% course load. So remember, OSAP doesn't automatically change your course load, right? You have to tell them, oh, I'm not in 60%, I'm in 100%. So he says, give me more money for the higher course load. So something like that, right? So again, I don't want to do that, check your file here because it's an open forum, that's your personal information. So that's better. I would ask you to submit the that personal message through the chat and ask Bridget or Jennifer at Team Kowloon and see if they can help you out with that.
So in summary, I should apply for UTAPs and grants both in September. And then
yeah, definitely. And check on your OSAP file to see if there's an error in it that can be easily fixed to get you more money.
I do the deferral or
Yeah, you can definitely do deferral. If you haven't already done the deferral, you can definitely do the deferral as long as you don't owe any fees from a previous session, and you also you submitted your OSAP application at least, I would say, at least a week ago. If those two cases are correct and you're enrolled in a course, you can definitely ask for a fee deferral and get registered officially right now.
if we do the fee deferral, what should be the future date that I should pay for the money?
So we kind of answered that before. It's up to you. Once you're deferred, you're registered. It's up to you when you want to pay your fees. The deadline date is actually April 30th, 2025. But remember, whatever you don't pay towards your fall portion of fees by middle of October will be subject to a service charge. Whatever you haven't paid towards your winter portion of fees by the middle of February will be subject to a service charge. So if you don't want to get a service charge added to your fees, you need to pay the full amount of your fall portion of fees by end of September. That's why we set out those deadlines. That's only for the service charge if you don't want a service charge. But you're not in any danger of losing your registration if you defer your fees and get officially registered. Even if you don't pay after that point, we won't remove your registration, but you will be charged extra charges for not paying your fees fully. So
Okay.
that's the incentive for you to pay early, not to get a service charge.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, no problem. Mohammed, your question, please.
Yes. So what is the fee deferral deadline for the international students with a third-party scholarship? Is it in April?
It's the same. No. It's also August 27th because you have to get registered by that date because the cancellation date, FINCA date, financially canceled date, is still August 28th for all students. So you must be registered by August 27th. So you definitely need to contact student council as early as you can to make that third-party arrangement.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Nasani, may I ask you for your question?
Yeah, so presentation, you said that we have to make our payments through our bank. So how
Yes.
does that exactly work?
Okay, so that's actually not our expertise, that's actually more for student accounts, but I'll show you on the website right now. To make a bank payment at the bank, have you ever used online banking to pay a third-party bill?
Yeah,
Like,
I have.
okay, so it's the same idea. So here, they actually tell you how to do it. They have basically what you do is you go onto your online banking and you set up the University of Toronto as one of your payees, right? They ask you for a payee. And then your account number they're going to ask for is actually on your invoice. It's at the top right corner is your Rosie account number. It's basically a combination of the first 5 letters of your last name and then your student number. If your last name has fewer than 5 letters or just 5, it would just be the first letters and then your student number. And then that's your account number. Then you just make a payment through that thing you set up through online banking, whatever amount you want, and that's it. And it usually takes 3 business days for that payment transfer to go through, and your payment's made. Very simple, take you 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Bonnie, may I have your question, please? Oh, Amani, are you there? Okay, I will get back to Amani's question. Khalid, you have the follow-up question?
Sorry.
Sorry, Amani, there you are. Sorry about that.
I was looking for my unmute button.
No problem.
I don't know if this question is going to be incoherent since I don't completely understand this, but
Okay.
what I wanted to ask was if you get both OSAP funding and like scholarships,
Mhm.
I guess you use like the scholarship deferral option.
Yes.
What happened to the rest of your OSAP funding?
Oh, you still get the OSAP funding. That doesn't change anything. I mean, OSAP
Like,
will
can you
just
defer
process
stuff,
slowly.
or
Oh, no,
does
there's
it
no need,
carry over?
there's no need to use an OSAP fee deferral if you got the scholarship deferral. The scholarship deferral is the better deferral. The scholarship deferral also gets you registered, and once you're registered, remember, you don't get deregistered, right?
Yeah.
Unless there's a sanction from the university for academic misconduct or something like that, but you're not in that
Yeah.
case. And then, yeah, you just say it's go. And the award deferral does not, you don't get any service charges within the fall winter session at all. So it's a much better deferral. So there's no need for an OSAP fee deferral. Now, OSAP
Yeah.
will still process normally because it's a concurrent application. They'll still deliver the money, 60% in the fall term and the other 40% in winter term. They'll go into
Yeah.
your and if you owe fees still for the fall portion, they'll redirect money towards that. Right, and
Okay.
if you don't, they'll send the money to your bank account. The same thing goes for the winter portion of OSAP. If all your fees have been paid, you get the money in your bank account and it doesn't come to the U of T. And that's how
And so-
OSAP works. It'll either go to U of T if you owe fees, or it'll go to your bank account if you don't owe fees.
And so
that
then
term.
could you use it for like residence or something else?
Well, residence fees are a part of your fee invoice, right? So
Oh,
likely
oh,
in residence,
Right.
if you have residence fees, it likely will be directed to U of T, right? But
Okay.
however, let's say your scholarship is gigantic, and you actually pay off everything, including residence. The OSAP money goes in your bank account, and literally you could do anything you want with that money. It's your
Oh.
loan, right? So like literally, if you want, you could take the money, go on a trip to Mexico if you want, then right? It's up to you what you do with your OSAP money. Now we prefer you use your OSAP money that you get in your bank account to pay for your university if it's so outstanding, because remember, you get service charged on it. And then if you don't use your OSAP money to pay your university, you can't get a grant from us and say that, oh, I used my OSAP money to buy a car. Can you give me money to pay my fees? Like, no, your OSAP money was for your fees. If you use the OSAP money for something else, it's up to you to replace it to pay your fees. Right, so that's your responsibility to use your fees as you see fit, right? So if you're getting scholarship money that helps you and it does cover the bulk of your fees, and OSAP money is kind of like a bonus for you, great. I mean, if you have extra OSAP money lying around and you don't need, what you can do is you can save it as a safety net, because anything can happen during a school year where unexpected costs, even unrelated to school, happens and you need a lot of money. So let's say you need emergency travel out of the country for some reason because there's an hopefully not, but let's say you have an ailing relative you need to visit for some reason. No, that's your emergency money that you should always have ready for you anyways, and you have that prepared, right? Or if not, then if by the end of the year you still have this leftover money you don't need, you can pay back the loan portion of your OSAP, so you don't have to worry about it in the future. Because you can always pay back OSAP anytime you want to. OSAP is an open loan. You can voluntarily repay OSAP anytime you want to. Now, there's no pressure on you to pay back OSAP while you're in full-time studies. So I wouldn't pay it back right away because you need that financial safety net during the school year, right? But near the end of April, like if you say that, oh yeah, nothing's happening, I don't need the extra money, everything should be okay, and I do have enough, extra OSAP money in my bank account doing nothing there. And if part of your OSAP was loan, you could choose to pay back the loan portion back, so you don't have to worry about it in the future. Right, so you do whatever you want with the money, but you're responsible for making your fee payment. So you're responsible to managing your money. So this is your test for adulthood, for managing all your monies and paying for your responsibilities.
All right, thank you.
Okay, no problem, Manny. Okay, Khalid, you had that follow-up question.
Yes, sorry, I just remembered. We don't need to do anything before the invoice and residence and new plan will be posted.
Correct, yeah, if your invoice doesn't reflect your meal plan or the residence fee charges right now, you don't have to worry about them. You're not being charged at this time. However, you do know they're coming, right? So you should prepare financially for that because you're going to residence, you've accepted it, you know that charge is coming, right? So for now, you don't have to worry about service charges for it because it's not on your student account invoice, but most likely it will show up by September, right? So which means it will be in play for the October service charge most likely. Right, so all you have to do right now is prepare to pay for it, right? So gather your monies and your resources together to cover it, right? But for now, yeah, unfortunately, you just can't see them, right? But it will show up at some point. You just have to keep monitoring your fee invoice.
Yes, so thank you very much. But if we would like to pay it, is there any option to pay it like before? Because I don't just want to do it in the university. It wouldn't be so easy because yes, here relatives can help. Like we can ask questions from yes.
Okay, so you can always pay early. I guess, however, it's tricky the way student accounts handles the money. I didn't think about that for a second because so the way payments work is when you pay, they usually always pay the earliest charge first. However, it's always the earliest tuition fee charge first is applied to. So if you pay extra towards the residence fee now, and you don't have residence fees, they'll actually apply your payment towards the winter portion of your fees, right? And then once your residence fees come, you still owe them, right? So you have to pay extra at that point. So that's my understanding is how they explained it to us. So you'll be paying with the winter portion fees when you don't need to. There's no pressure on you to pay your winter fees if you overpay right now. So I would say you really should wait until your residence fees show up before you pay. What I would say is if your relatives can help you with money to pay it, tell them to give money into your bank account. So at least you get interest in your bank account, whatever interest you might get from the bank, even if it's 0.001%. It's better you get the interest than the university getting the interest, right? So you might as well keep in your bank account and then you just pay the UT via online banking. For your own Canadian, and so make sure that you put it in a Canadian bank account. You can only use online banking for my Canadian bank account.
Thank you very much. I understood.
Okay, no problem. Avani, do you still have a question for us? I see your hand raised, so I'm not sure. Okay, that's for the last question. Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions? Or Lucas, do you see any new questions pop up in the chat?
Yeah, there's two questions I see in the chat. The first one, someone's asking, are OSAP grants directly deposited to their bank account or like on, I guess, the Acorn invoice?
No, it's always to the invoice. So all awards at the UT, including scholarships, you're getting a scholarship, will be first placed into your student invoice. And they check to see if you still owe fees for that current session. If your fees have been paid, then it will be any amount will be shown as a credit in your account. Actually, it goes towards both your fall and winter fees, scholarships. So if they have been fully paid off, then you would get a credit in your student account, which you can ask for a refund for on Acorn. What's the second part of that question? I might have missed it.
Oh, the last question, someone asked if your anticipated OSAP amount on the net cost in Acorn is less than the funding that OSAP calculated. Will Acorn correct this or should it be corrected manually?
Can you say that again?
If the anticipated OSAP amount
Yep.
on the net cost listed on Acorn is less than the funding that OSAP calculated.
Well, the information actually comes from OSAP itself, actually, for net cost view. So it should be different unless you recently got a reassessment. In that case, on the next OSAP data download we get from OSAP, that should be updated. So it should reflect the actual amount of OSAP. But again, net cost view is not that useful. I always steer students away from net cost view unless you're doing general, like try to figure out how much you have to pay out of pocket for the whole year. But other than that, it's not a really useful tool to see how much you have to pay at a certain time because it doesn't reflect that. It only reflects your overall for the whole session, fall and winter combined. Right? So I always tell students, yeah, actually use your fee invoice to see the amount of fees owing at a certain time. And it also shows the amount of OSAP payments that have come. right? And then whatever has been, and also amount of grants have been put in your student account that were applied towards fees. And whatever has been paid out of that, that's what you need to pay to avoid service charges. So the invoice is the tool to do that, not the net cost view. It's not used, the net cost view is not useful for that purpose at all. So hopefully that's what they're trying to get at, right? Going for the net cost view. Okay, just to let you know, I do have a scheduled appointment with a student at 2. Right, so I do have to wrap this up, this question and answer question. So I'm going to ask students for any final questions right now, and because I do have to sign off in about 4 minutes to get ready for that next appointment for a student. So please, if anyone has final questions, please put them forward. Either raise your hand and ask it live, or you could put it in the chat. Yeah, I'm not counting it that far in the chat. If you could see them.
Hey, I have a question.
Yes.
It was already answered, but like I did not really understand it. The question was like OSAP showed me that I am eligible for fundings in both grants and loans.
Okay.
In case I selected no loans option,
Yep.
do I have to complete my MSFAA registration online to receive my grants?
No, you still should, because the MSFA is also your agreement, right? And it's a master agreement in case in the future you do choose to accept the loans, because that might change over the year. You might find if you take the grant portion only now and you run out of money, the only option for you is, well, you better take the loan portion of it, because we don't provide funding to replace OSAP loans. It's there. The money's there for you to use. If you refuse it, we're not replacing it for you, right? And if you don't have, and let's say your own resources are not enough to cover the difference, you might need to take the OSAP loan. Right, so you must do the MSFAA.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Okay, I know we threw a ton of information at you guys. Hopefully, yeah, you can refer to the presentation where it's posted, and I believe the posting was put in the chat earlier. And again, if you do have questions regarding financial aid, you can feel free to submit tickets. You can also make appointments to see counselors here. It is a busy time, however, financial aid, because we're getting started school. It is the busiest time for financial aid. So be advised that it could take some time to work on documents, especially for your application, and also to get an appointment itself. Right, so make sure if you do need to meet with one of us, to provide a time that might be later in, could be a couple of weeks in the future before we can set up the appointment due to the volume we get. Also, if you have academic advising questions, they do advise, because they have a very high volume right now, but they're also holding webinars and meetings. They actually go through those sessions, because they answer almost all of your questions in terms of registration, course selection, program selection, et cetera, et cetera. They're very good presentations. They would answer all your questions. So I'd say, yeah, just do that, and say now you can answer much faster than trying to send a ticket to one of the academic advisors. So it is 1:54, and you have to leave in a minute. So yep, last call for any questions. I don't know if you see anything, Lucas. I'm still very high up on the chat, so I don't see anything at the most recent chat question.
Yep, I don't see anything outstanding as of right now.
Okay, perfect. And thank you so much for your help, Lucas. And thank you
Yeah,
all
of
for
course.
attending. So hopefully that's been very helpful for everyone today. Thank you for joining the Financial Aid webinar. And we hope to see you in the fall. And yep, and for now, make sure you apply for OSAP, get yourself deferred, registered right away. Then you don't have to worry about it. All you have to do then is get ready for school, right? And yeah, have a good semester, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Francis. Thanks, Lucas.